you could see a star one day. He has the ability to be a star. Now, whether he gets there or not, that's a lot has to do with him and certain things that go into it. But he definitely has the brains and the ability to be one.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK, that was Craig Berube, former Blues head coach. That was a few years ago, Alex, when we talked to Craig Berube during the summer. He was saying, hey, Robert Thomas, if he gets everything in the right direction, this thing continues in the right trajectory, there's real star potential here. And as we've been watching the Blues without Robert Thomas, it reminds me of that old saying, Alex. Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Oh, yeah. That's what they told me in long-distance relationships in high school, and they never worked.
Yeah, that's what they told me when I moved to Kansas City, and then I moved back here to St. Louis, and now I'm married, happily married. And
so it worked for you.
Yeah, everything worked out all right.
It's like there's more fish in the sea, which I guess that doesn't apply when Robert Thomas gets injured, because there's not more fish.
I haven't found them.
You still looking for those fishes?
So anyways, Robert Thomas.
Long John Silver, man.
I felt like watching him this season, the performance wasn't up to my expectations. Now, maybe some of that is on me. My expectations might have been too high, right? We saw what he was last year, which was a legit number one center in the NHL, and he took his game to that level, I feel like, that Craig Berube was talking about previously. He became a star in the NHL. And so this season, I was like, oh, well, naturally, progress, although not linear, I expect him to get even better than what he was last year. I didn't feel like we saw that. It was only like 6 games. So it's totally unfair to judge a player on any 6-game stretch, much less the first 6 games of the season, when they've been juggling up the lines all preseason and then continuing into the regular season. But I thought Jeremy Rutherford, the reason I'm bringing this up today, Alex, Jeremy Rutherford had an unbelievable piece over on The Athletic earlier today. And it broke down the Blues offense with Robert Thomas and the Blues defense with Robert Thomas compared to what they've done without him so far this year. And oh my God, the graphics in this are jarring. It's like, so you want red in front of the net, right? Red means lots of shots, lots of opportunities. High danger area, lots of red. That's a great thing for your offense. Well, that's exactly what it is. It looks like a puddle of blood when Robert Thomas is on the ice in front of the net. We're going to make him
bleed.
When he's out there. When he's not out there, it looks like the depths of the ocean. It's completely blue in front of the net, and the only places where you see red are like way on the outside, like in the circle, basically. Alex, I think I underestimated the impact that Robert Thomas had on the ice because the results weren't always there, even though the process was still good with him on the ice. And now that he's not there, maybe this isn't breaking news to anybody, turns out you really need that number one center. It's like when Petro got removed from the equation. We're like, maybe they can piece this thing together with Justin Falk and with Torrey Krug. No, you need a number one defenseman in the NHL. You also need a number one centerman. Unfortunately for the Blues right now, they are playing without both.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
They have pulled their number one defenseman and number one center out of the lineup, so maybe we give them a little bit of grace for the time being.
Yeah, he was underperforming in the sense of you didn't see him putting up like 15 goals in his first 10 games. And maybe that's just because you came into the season and, look, I put maybe unrealistic expectations, but I did truly believe he could get to be a 100-point player this season. The offense was there. The scoring chances were there with Robert Thomas on the ice. The issue for the Blues in the first however many games before he went down with injury, I think it was 9, they weren't finishing. Like the Corsi rating with Robert Thomas on the ice in 7 games, which I know is a small sample size, but it was at 58%, meaning this when he's on the ice, his team has the puck.
He was basically a baseball player. Sorry to interrupt. He was basically a baseball player that was hitting the crap out of the baseball, but there was somebody there to catch it every time he hit.
I care about results,
yeah,
Brandon.
so does everybody. Fair. The high-danger scoring chances in those first 3 games, like they had 11 in the first period against the San Jose Sharks. And you remember how many goals they scored in that first period? 1. So Robert Thomas was underperforming in the sense of you didn't see the numbers to back it up. So at the beginning of the season for him, you were talking about 5 points or 6 points in 7 games, and he was a -2. But the scoring chances were there. The puck possession was there. The faceoffs were insane. This guy is at 71% in 4 of the 7 games that he played from the faceoff dot.
Meanwhile, the rest of the team,
it's at like 25%
steal
in
from
the faceoff dot. He's done everything you needed him to do. The Blues were just struggling to get finishers. And I don't think that was going to last. I think at some point that dam was going to break. But Robert Thomas is everything for this team in the offensive zone. But I thought the part that was most impressive for me with him was on the defensive side. That's where you're really lacking with Robert Thomas being out, because you don't have the centerman that knows where to clog the right lanes and be in the right spot at the right time. And now you're utilizing two centermen who are unfamiliar with that position and two guys who can't play to the same level that Robert Thomas does.
All right, so we're missing Robert Thomas.
I know, buddy. You can cry.
I'm missing my full health. So the other thing I'm missing, and you mentioned this, Alex, is the ability to finish, right? Put the puck in the back of the net. Here's the Blues' current goal scorers in terms of their pace based on how many goals they've scored thus far. Jordan Kyrou is on pace for 26 goals. Pavel Buchnevich, Jake Neighbors, Dylan Holloway, all on pace for 21 goals this year. Braden Shin, Matthew Joseph, Brandon Saad on pace for 10 goals this year. Alex, we expect this team to be better offensively. They've got to be better offensively at some point. Who can you reasonably expect to get more from? Because sometimes you look around, like I remember for the Cardinals, you look around and be like, man, this offense stinks. Who can they get more from? And then you look at the numbers offensively, and you're like, man, I'm not sure there's more in there. I'm not sure there's untapped potential here. I think this is just who they are. When you look at what the Blues are getting out of their goal scorers so far this year, where can they get more, Alex?
So if Kyrie's on pace for 26, you'll get more from him. I think he'll be a 30-goal scorer. He's always a streaky guy. You saw that where he scored goals in 3 straight games. The two main ones that I look at and say they're going to be better than what they're on pace for is Shen and Saad. And I know people are like, no way, those guys have both been terrible. Brandon Saad didn't play more than 2 minutes in that game against the Boston Bruins. That's fine.
Period, yeah.
But how many times in a season throughout Brandon Saad's time in St. Louis have we gone, man, this guy's invisible? And then for 10 straight games, he scores 5 goals.
Yeah.
And it's like, Brandon Saad!
And we yell at him for not passing.
Which makes a lot of sense. In fact, he's probably passing a little bit more than he should right now. Brandon Saad and Braden Shen, as Panger used to say, the cream always rises to the top. Brandon Saad and Braden Shen are going to be 20-goal scorers for you. Did you wish there was more? Yeah, I thought there would be 25 with Braden Shen. I thought last year was just a fluke. It was a bad season. But right now, you're just not seeing that same type of player that we saw a few years ago. But those two guys I expect to be better than on pace for 10 goals this season. The one that's not going to be better than what he's on pace for is Pavel Buchnevich. And that's where I think it really hurts this team, because that's a guy that I viewed as a 30 to 35 goal scorer with Robert Thomas. You don't have Robert Thomas, and he's playing the center position even with Robert Thomas. So if you don't have that, he's not going to be on pace for what you expect with him.
Yeah, I think you expect a little bit more from Kyrou. Like, he should be a 30-goal scorer this year. I think, to your point on Booch, I think, like, you hope you get to, like, 25 with him at the center position, because that would kind of be in line with what he's done the last 2 years here in St. Louis. The ones that you really got to have pick up are going to be the Saad and Shens. And I think Saad will get there. I think he will be a 20-goal scorer. The one that I'm skeptical of is Shen. Look, I've been down on Shen's game for the last year plus now. I don't think he's aging particularly well. I think you're seeing that he's kind of on the back end of his career here. I don't know if he's a guy that's going to get to that 20-goal mark. And when you were kind of writing in pen that you were going to have him score at minimum 20 goals this season, that's where you really lose production. He's not a guy that really fits into the top 6, but he's being asked to play in that role now.
Not to be Debbie Downer with this, but I made this comp in the press box to JR the other night when we were just watching Braden Shen. Shen feels a little like what David Backes went through when he left St. Louis, to where you had the 27 goals, 26 goals. You're like, holy bleep, this is your number one centerman. And then the Blues said, nope, not going to be the guy. And I remember that offseason, people were like, man, you're going to walk away from David Backes, your captain? And he went to Boston 17-74, 14-57, and then kind of really struggled there, wanted to stay healthy, to play.
Again.
Yeah. I don't know if Shen's going to be that bad to where he's only playing 16 games in a season or 15 games in a season, because he just brings a presence that you want on the ice. But the offensive numbers, I'm starting to grow a lot more skeptical of them being where I thought he was going to be. I mean, he's 31 years old. I didn't think he was going to be this significant of a drop-off, but Backes hit that drop-off at about 32, and then it never got back to where it was.
They just play such a grinding style. Also, Braden Shen has been in the league since he was, 13?
13.
Basically.
It's not allowed. You can't do that.
He got into the league when he was 20 years old, so he's been in the league for 16 years, guys.
And playing the same style for 16 years, and that's the thing with him. I mean, it's a style that doesn't go away in terms of how they play, but it's a style that can fall through the cracks of an NHL season, because if you can't stay at that same pace, that same level from start to finish, it wears and tears on your body and you can't be the same guy.
He has 2,000 career NHL hits. eventually those add up, man. And when you play that style, it definitely leads itself to having a shorter lifespan as a top line player. Because Shin at his best was like a top 6 forward legitimately, like had the ability to masquerade as a top line player in the NHL. He's just not that guy anymore. And that's okay, but it's tough to watch sometimes.
Yeah.
It's tough to watch.
Yeah, they're in a spot right now where best case scenario, Shen's probably still on your third line and you're using that depth 10, 12 minutes a night and you're still getting the leadership. But for right now, where you've got him and Pavel Buchnevich in the top 2 centerman spots, it's going to be really hard to look at this and say they'll find a way to get back to that level. They will, because for me, Braden Shen's always been a streaky goal scorer. Don't forget, last year he went 15 games without scoring a goal, and everyone was like, oh, Braden Shen's cooked, and then he finds a way to get to 20 goals. It's going to happen for those two. The question's going to be, is it going to happen in junk time at the end of the season where it's not as impactful as right now, where you need to at least keep your head above water until Thomas and Broberg come back?
Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Blues back in action tonight against the Buffalo Sabres, the beginning of this road trip. Buffalo, not exactly great at goal suppression this year. So if the Blues are going to get something going offensively, this would be a good game to be able to do so.
They don't have Tage Thompson tonight, and they don't have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. It's one of my favorite names right now in the NHL. That's their goaltender. That's why their goal suppression sucks.
Ours isn't very good either.
Actually, spell it.
Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen?
No,
I'm looking at it right now,
Oh,
unfortunately.
come on, man. T-Bone, spell it.
Uka. U.
Okay.
K.
Yeah.
Uka. A.
Okay, move on.
UKKO.
What?
UKKO. Dash.
Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen.
PEC.
Nope. 2 Ks. A.
Now go to Luukkonen.
Yeah, good luck. They are against the Sabres tonight. Pre-game coverage with Alex begins at 5:30 right here on your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. Alex coming in early in relief of the Fast Lane. In 15 minutes, we'll talk it all over with Joey Vitale. He's the Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and the FanDuel Sports Network. So we'll talk to him coming up in about 15 minutes. But next, sure sounds like Brady Cook is not playing on Saturday.
Hell yeah.
What's that mean for Mizzou? Me and T-Bone got into it before the show. Hopefully we don't do it again. Coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Yeah, we have a lot of confidence in Drew, and whoever gives us the best opportunity to win is who we're going to play. And yeah, we won't know anything on Brady till later in the week, but I would anticipate Drew's going to, we'll prepare for Drew to be the starter.
That was Eli Drinkwitz yesterday talking about the update on the Mizzou quarterback situation. Alex, my expectation is that Brady Cook will not play on Saturday. Now, it's still possible he will. He's listed as doubtful according to yesterday's injury report for the Tigers, but this game against South Carolina becomes really difficult for Mizzou to win with Drew Pine in the lineup. And listen, hey, we all saw what happened in the fourth quarter. He went out there and...
see those final 3 minutes?
Yeah. He did his
Three
best.
tutties, baby.
It's incredible.
Did you guys see the celebration he did, the McGregor?
Yeah.
Look, Drew, I understand that's a moment that you just want to celebrate, but I don't know if you can do that in that moment.
I got to say, he did pretty well. Better than I was expecting.
I watched a lot of Conor McGregor celebrations. Do it every once in a while. Like when I get my daughter to go pee on the potty, I walk out of the bathroom with a little bit of a strut. Hell yeah!
See, he did it better than you did.
Okay.
And better than I did, to be fair.
Mine's more of a Vince McMahon strut. Mine's not really a Conor McGregor
Not a
strut.
comp I would want.
Yeah.
So Drew Pine probably the starting quarterback for Mizzou this weekend. Alex, I don't even know how to necessarily frame this the best way, but what do you do with this season if this is the way that it's going to finish? Like, if Drew Pine's the guy the next few weeks, I think there's a real chance that Brady Cook starts at least the last couple of games for Mizzou. But if he's the guy, we all know what the season was supposed to be. It was college football playoff or bust, right? And given the context of the year, me and T-Bone disagree on this.
I know. Don't ask me. I think you two should just go right into battle.
I like how he said lean into this segment. Oh, we got into it. No, BK started yelling at me and getting Tony. So, of course, we got into it.
I said I don't like the way that T-Bone watches college football.
BK doesn't like the way somebody's a fan.
So, what do we do with this season for Mizzou? Like, if they end up losing this game on Saturday, it's pretty understandable. You've got your backup quarterback, your backup center. You don't have your number 3 wide receiver. South Carolina's a really good team. You're on the road. They have the best defensive line maybe in the country. They have a really good redshirt freshman quarterback and a great running back. How much criticism is fair of Mizzou if they end up losing this game and falls in 7-3 on the season?
I mean, I don't put any criticism on this game if they lose this game because you have like nobody that you'd expect to have to win a football game, specifically this type of one. Now, if you win, you give them their flowers because with Drew Pine and all of these position players that are not playing, if you win that game, that's impressive. But if you lose it, I'm not going to sit here and bash this team and be like, see, this is Mizzou for you. I go back to the A&M game. That's the one that you'll go to and you look at the season, and that's where the disappointment sets in. Now, I know you and T-Bone are going to get a little angry with each other here, so I'll let you two cook. But as a fan, in terms of individual games, sure, I'm still rooting for Mizzou to win because back-to-back double-digit win seasons is impressive. But I'm always going to look at this season as a disappointment because you didn't get to the college football playoffs. Because watching you perform as an 11-2 team last season and watching you in the 2 losses nearly pull off victories with LSU and Georgia and thinking you've got the same offense. In fact, you've got a better offense because you've seasoned it one more year of Brady Cook and Luther Burden, and you've got some more weapons that you can utilize. And it feels like you leave a little crumbs on the table here because defensively you were a really improved squad. So no matter what happens the rest of the way, I want to see them get to double digits. If you don't get to double digits, that's even more frustrating. Injuries can explain it. But it's always going to be a disappointment for me because I thought this was the year you should have been a playoff team.
Yeah,
Tanner?
I think,
before.
for criticism of them in this game against South Carolina, I don't think it just depends on if it's a loss. I think if they lose, they're competitive, and it looks like the game plan by Drinkwitz and Kirby Moore is there. Okay, I understand it. You're playing with basically one hand tied behind your back because Drew Pine's your quarterback. No offense, Drew, but I
think you would agree.
I think now that you've had like 2-3 weeks really knowing that Drew Pine's probably starting this game, so you have a better idea of how you're going to game plan for it. So if they come out, they don't look great offensively, and you just look at it and go, man, what was their game plan? Then I think it'll be fair for some criticism. But I still think missing the playoff makes this season a failure because of the expectation. And you can say all you want about the injury. Hell, Brady Cook got hurt. How could they beat Alabama? How could they beat South Carolina without Brady Cook? The reason that I said that the A&M game is still the one that you need to circle is it got rid of one of their mulligans. And they were healthy in that game. Mm-hmm. And they were healthy, and not only did they lose, they got killed in that game. And that's where I would say I think missing the playoff for this team, because they have that win against A&M and their losses are to South Carolina and Alabama, and then they win out the final two games, they might be a playoff team.
Honestly, even if they're close against A&M and Alabama, like forget winning. Sure. If they had been close in those two games, you're in the discussion still. Yeah. I know that sounds crazy, but I think the margin of those losses is also part of this. Them losing 75-10 in the combined score, right? The aggregate scoring, the way that soccer does it, those, whatever. That is part of what is the argument against Missouri, is that they didn't just lose. They got their ass kicked in the two games that really mattered on their schedule. And so that is why, like, if I put on my glass half full hat, right? We don't have black and gold glasses in here, but like if you just
there's gold glasses. Look behind look behind the computer. There's gold glasses right there.
So the year of our Lord 2024.
Our Lord Eli Drinkwitz 2024.
Here, if I put on my black and gold glasses for Mizzou, I can't see a damn thing in these. These are tough.
Yeah, imagine doing a whole segment with it.
If Mizzou did find a way to win this game, again, I'm not expecting it. I think it's crazy to even really talk about this, but here we are. If they find a way to win this game, it will be by far the best win on their schedule. And it puts you into the discussion of like, hey, maybe you could get back into the top 15 or so by the end of the season. I still think it's a very long shot odds for them to be able to get into the playoff. It's basically impossible at this point, more or less. But winning this game really changes, in my opinion, how you feel about the season. Because it would be like a real, not a signature victory, but one that you can at least hang your hat on. Because right now, like, what's Missouri's best win on their schedule this year?
Vandy?
It's probably it, right?
Probably, yeah.
Which
South Carolina is better than Vanderbilt, in my opinion. And this is on the road. Something that Missouri has not done a lot is get quality victories under Eli Drinkwitz on the road. It's be a huge win for him, man. Especially with the backup quarterback, backup center, not having your third wide receiver in this one. This would be the kind of win that he could point back to and say, that's me. The kind of win that, like, in the NFL, Matt LaFleur, when he had, Malik Willis as their starting quarterback for a couple of weeks, they found a way to win with their backup quarterback in there. And Drew Pine, for all of his struggles, he did win 8 games at Notre Dame a couple of years ago. He's not a very good quarterback, but he can make a couple of plays. And really it comes down to, hey, man, can you play some awesome defense for 60 minutes? And have a running game, figure things out. And if you can do that, you at least keep yourself in it. I don't think they will, but that's the formula. That's the only formula that exists for Mizzou going into this game. And hey, Luther Burden, can you make a few plays? He finally made him at the end of that game. Theo Weiss, can you make a few plays? Finally made him at the end of the game last week. That's a formula for Mizzou to be able to at least keep this one close.
Yeah, I don't disagree. It would be a big win, and it would be their best win on the schedule for Mizzou. I have a tough time looking at it and saying, like, that makes the season kind of okay, you know? Because, like, you beat South Carolina, they're not going to finish in the top 25 probably, so it's not even a top 25 win by the end of the season. And it's South Carolina, you know? And when expectations were playoff or bust, it's hard for me to leave a season and have Eli Drinkwitz going, see, look, we went on the road with our backup quarterback and beat South Carolina, because you know what that win will be by the time we get to football season next year? Forgotten. Everybody will just look back on last year and say they didn't make the playoff.
I disagree with that completely.
I wouldn't look at that. I will forget about that win. If you're being honest,
Mizzou fans won't.
I think there's a decent chunk of the fan base that would, especially because your expectation was playoff or bust. And
Understood, but if you win this game on the road at South Carolina with your backup quarterback in there, South Carolina's a good team, man. I think you're underselling how good of a win this would be.
I agree that South Carolina's, but they're not a name brand team, right? It's not like you're going on the road and beating Georgia.
With this team, this is a rivalry game. Like, I don't think nationally people view it that way, nor should they. That's totally fine. For Mizzou, this is a rivalry game. 2013, it was the Connor Shaw game where Connor Shaw comes in the second half and they end up winning in double overtime. You remember that, Alex? Mm-hmm. The Andrew Baggett right under the upright to lose the game in double overtime. First game I ever went to with my wife.
Did you cry in front of her?
No, I told her right beforehand, he's going to miss this kick. And she said, he's like right there.
She's like, God, you're so negative.
It was a 24-yard field goal. They were at the 7-yard line. I was like, no, he's going to miss this kick. This is how it works for Mizzou. Congratulations, Kara. You get to see this in person. And
poor Kara.
And then it happened, and they lost, and, the whole thing.
BK cried.
2014, it was the comeback for Matty Mock. You had the monsoon game where Mizzou loses in South Carolina. That was devastating back in 2018, the start of the downfall of the Barry Odom era. Like, There's been a lot of really tight games in the series between Mizzou and South Carolina. I think it's the biggest rivalry for Mizzou in the SEC so far. It's a big one. It's a big one. Big one for Eli Drinkwitz, and I think there's a lot more upside than there is downside to it associated with it.
From a non-biased Mizzou fan, I'll remember it, but not in the sense of like what a win. I'll remember it as, damn, they just won that game with Drew Pine. Like that's the.
If they win this game and go 11-2 this year, Mizzou fans will remember this.
That's the memorable one.
They'll remember it.
Yeah.
All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we're getting into questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the Your Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. It'll be the Citrus Bowl. Mizzou versus Illinois in the Citrus Bowl.
I'd rather the Pop-Tart Bowl.
Mizzou wouldn't schedule.
How about the Cheez-It Bowl? Cheez-It Bowl would be good.
They'll be like, we'll play Army. How's that sound?
Yeah, the Armed Forces Bowl again. Oh, God.
That'd be fun.
Coming up next, time for Joey Vitale, our Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and FanDuel Sports Midwest. He joins us each and every week. He does so next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londa Chevrolet and Johnny Londa Autoplex. Blues back in action tonight as they visit the Buffalo Sabres. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5:30 with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 6:30. The Sports Center update was driven by Johnny Londa Chevrolet and Johnny Londa Autoplex. See them at Londa.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, happy to go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline for our weekly visit with the one and only Joey Vitale. He's the Blues analyst for 101 ESPN and, of course, FanDuel Sports Midwest. He joins us every Thursday on BK and Ferrario. Joe, appreciate the time as always, man. How you doing today?
Joey! Did you get buffalo wings?
Boys, doing good. How are you today?
Doing okay.
BK's whining over here about his cough, Joe. You ever had a cough where you just keep all over the place?
Have you ever had pneumonia, Joe?
It's the worst. My wife, when she was pregnant with our firstborn, she had this cough, and we were living in my parents' basement because I was playing for Pittsburgh at the time, and we spent a couple months every summer. And I just said, "Hey, you got to knock that off." She kept me up all night. I said, "Listen, I understand you're
She was pregnant, Joe, when you said this?
How far along, Joe?
She was early. She was sicker than a dog. She's throwing up, coughing. I'm like, you gotta get your life together. This is not good.
You rolled over to your newly pregnant wife and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, but you need to get your ish together and you need to figure out this cough because I'm trying to sleep."
Yeah, as they're living in their parents' basement.
I'm trying. Like, listen, my parents gave us the basement. You're waking up the whole house. You're waking up the dog, Bo. I mean, come on. Like, we got to get this thing together.
It's not fun. And I got to tell you, as somebody that does, talking for a living, it's really not enjoyable when you go into a coughing fit midway through a segment and I've got 6 minutes left here. This is going to be problematic.
Well, it's almost like they should invent a cough button to help you guys out.
Nice. Nailed it, Joe. Mic drop.
That helps until you go into a coughing fit for a minute and your co-host can't cough.
Yeah, I was
going
going
to
to
have
say
his coughing button down while you are coughing.
One of us has to take over while the other's hunched over in the corner going,
You know what? Alex has to take over the show. It's per usual, I guess, right?
Amen, brother.
Joe.
Amen,
Damn.
Joey V. God, I love this.
Tough but fair. All right, Joe, let's talk a little bit about these Blues. There was a great piece over in The Athletic. It doesn't happen all the time, but JR really knocked this one out of the park. Joey, he wrote about Robert Thomas and the effects that the Blues have had since he's been out. Joe, I like charts. I like being able to see the red and the blue of, hey, where are the shots coming from? Where are they not coming from? There are some great charts in this piece that basically break down, hey, when Robert Thomas is on the ice, the Blues are shooting almost exclusively from in front of the net. And when he's not on the ice, the Blues never shoot in front of the net. What have you noticed as the biggest diffeces without Robert Thomas on the ice so far, Joe?
To me, the biggest thing is actually not the offensive zone. John Kelly and I were talking about this before last game. The Blues they're only down about a half a goal up into the start of the last game, and it probably changed a little bit, but they were only down about a half a goal without Robert Thomas when it comes to goals for. The biggest area where you miss them is the goals against. I mean, this is something that, a casual fan would say, man, no Robert Thomas, offensively, here's a player that got you over a point per game last year, and you're going to be hurting on scoring. But I think anyone who really knows this team and really knows the depths and the true value of Robert Thomas, we should have been saying the opposite. You're going to miss some goals, but the real issue is going to be keeping the puck out of your net. And that's what we're seeing, guys. I mean, the goals against right now are a little bit out of control. They've gotten 2 touchdown games against them with an extra point, actually with a 2-point conversion now with these 2 8-1s. And, it's unfortunate. It really is. But, the good news is that, Thomas is with the team. He has been skating. But his real value to me is going up against other teams' top lines. That's where he was so good last year. It's amazing he was still able to produce at over a point per game and become his first All-Star year. But, going up against the McKinnons, the other night, going up against Pasternak and Marchand and shutting them down and discouraging them. Because right now they're leaning very heavily on Pavel Buchnevich to be your top line center, who, by the way, doesn't feel the most comfortable at the center position right now, including the faceoff dot. And that's where he's really been struggling, and he's been the first to tell me that personally. So it's a tough thing. It's very, very tough. I definitely appreciate the offense and the numbers and the charts about where shots are coming from, but this team right now is in dire straits without him on the defensive end.
Joe, I know he's not expected to play anytime soon, but for a Robert Thomas being on this road trip just to be skating, how uplifting can that be for a locker room?
Very uplifting. I mean, he's your star player. He's around. He's a great presence. To me, it also showcases the leadership of him wanting to be on this road trip. Like I said, we don't expect to see him on this road trip, but I think he wants that camaraderie of picking the group up. And when you see one of your best players, if not your best offensive player, in and around, on playing card games, in the rink, warming up with you, being on the ice for morning skates, it's an uplifting moment. To me, this has got Alexander Steen kind of written all over it. He's such a proponent. He loves to promote the team camaraderie. He understands that winning is having a winning culture. You have to start with a winning culture. You have to start with a winning group, and you have to start with winning relationships if you want to do anything. And I think that certainly Robert Thomas had an option to stay home throughout this road trip. Listen, I don't even know if he's going to be available next week, but the thought of just getting back on the road and creating some energy, that's what this team needs right now. They need confidence. They need energy. They've been playing some good hockey. I was talking to Steen and Doug Armstrong last night when we got in. They're seeing a lot of great things. They're seeing a lot of great things about this team. They're actually more encouraged than I thought, and I don't think they were being phony about it. And I think that you put all that together, this is a team that could use a little boost, and I think having his presence around has been big.
Joe, I don't know how much you can disclose because I know those conversations with Army and Steen are kind of confidential, but what are some of those things that they're seeing that they're optimistic about with this team?
Yeah, number one, I think they're still looking at a goalie and a goaltending tandem that is special. That last game against the Boston Bruins, that game could have got out. And personally, the way I feel about this game could have got out of control pretty quickly. I mean, Jordan Binnington made some outrageous saves. I know that the one that got past him on David Pasternak, the late one, there may be some people out saying, does he got to have that one? Maybe. But at the same time, there could have been probably 7 or 8 goals that had gone in that would go against most goalies in the National Hockey League. So to me, that's a big one. I think they're liking the speed. I think they're liking what Dylan Holloway is bringing, Matthew Joseph. They're liking what's happening there. And you know what? From a personal standpoint of one of the best players in Jordan Kyrou, I know that his numbers are a little bit off this year compared to on pace for what he wants to get to next year or at the end of this year. But at the same time, they're looking at a player that is forechecking better, that is finishing hits better, that is tracking back better. I think they're seeing a rounded out game from him. And not to mention, there's some younger guys that are getting bigger opportunities that are really kind of grabbing this thing. Whether it be Alexei Toropchenko, who I still consider a young player that has a lot of growth. That line with him and Walker and Foxa, they've been very consistent. They've been getting after things. You see Scott Perunovich get that goal. I think he's getting more confident. I think he's looked really good defensively as well. So you put all that together. I mean, there's a lot of really encouraging pieces, and I think that those are some of the ones that are really, really stand out.
Joey Vitale is our guest for just another minute or two here on 101 ESPN. Joey, I wanted to follow up on Kyrou because that's something I feel like I've noticed as well is, hey, maybe the goal-scoring numbers aren't there. He's on pace for, I think, 25 goals this year, but it is 14 points over the first 16 games, which is nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that's a decent start to the season. It almost feels to me, and I'm curious your perspective on this show, kind of similar to what we saw from Robert Thomas 2 years ago. Not last year where it felt like he really took that step as a number one center, but 2 years ago, I felt like you started to see down the stretch some of those moments where it's like, okay, yeah, he's starting to get it. The all-around game is really starting to come together. Is that how you're feeling about Kyrou this year, where, hey, this is a step forward, and as you keep adding along here, maybe you eventually get the other stuff that comes along with it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that there's a maturity level with the player, and I've seen this, being in the locker room and being alongside these young players. I've also seen it from the broadcasting perspective now my 7th year in the booth and watching players like Thomas come in. We both came in at the same year, and we saw that kind of evolution of where he is now. And you see young players do this, and there's a threshold, there's a line, there's a moment, whatever you want to call it, where a young player takes a big step. And when they make this step, it completely changes their game. And I will try to break it down as best as I can, but it's a young player that comes into the league and they bring all their skills and all their talents. For Jordan Kyrou, it's his speed, it's his shot, it's his stick handling. And you come in as a young player and you think, okay, I'm going to use my tools and I'm going to help this team do what I do, and hopefully it helps the team. But you don't look at necessarily how, bad plays really have an effect on the game. You're kind of hyper-focused on your game. When the players take this step, it completely changes the team dynamic. And that step is that you realize it's not just your game and it's not just this play. When you understand that this play that I'm going to make not only has an impact on this play, it has an impact on this shift. It has an impact on this period. It has an impact on this game. And it has an impact on this season. Like, everything has a ripple effect. And I think that for Robert Thomas, he really figured that out about 2 years ago. I think Jordan Kyrou is right on the cusp of fully understanding what that is. When you turn that puck over, and he had his fair share of turnovers in the first few years. He looked at it like, oh, it's a turnover. Okay, they're going to mark it as a turnover. Oh, well, I'm going to get it back and do something better with it. But now you're starting to see that, no, that turnover, not only can it cost you games, which we have seen this year, but it costs you momentum. It costs you maybe your line mates changing on bad times because they expect you to get that in. Now they don't. And all of a sudden, it creates momentum going against you. So every play, as much as this game is already full of pressure, but every play is under this microscope that it will have a ripple effect on that next play and then that next shift and certainly the next period. And ultimately, the more positive plays you make, the better chance you're going to have to win this game. So that's where I see Jordan Kyrou's really progression this season and up until the last season, where he's making those team-connected plays. He's making a play with the intent of not only the play itself in front of him, but ultimately the momentum and the style for which this team knows they have to play in order to win games.
It's a really good answer, Joe. Really good insight as well into what that's like as a player through the development curve. Appreciate the time as always, man. Thanks so much. Enjoy the trip up to Buffalo. Enjoy this road trip. We'll talk with you again next week.
Sounds good, boys. Always a pleasure. And BK, get yourself some cough syrup, will you?
Yeah, I'm doing
as
my
Joey
best.
would tell his wife, get your ish together, man.
Yeah, I'm going to urgent care after the show. We'll get this thing figured out. Joey Vitale.
People got to get some sleep.
You're waking up the dogs.
Wake up the dog.
See you, buddy.
Alex is going to carry this thing as he does every day.
Yeah.
Nothing different.
There was tone there. There was tone there. T-Bone, you heard it. You heard it.
I did hear it.
Okay. See,
man.
there it is. BK's tone again.
Oh, he's
Coming up
again.
next.
Going to throw it a break?
Yeah, sure. Coming up next, we've got questions and answers. Our text line, Air Comfort Service text line, is 314-399-9646. You send us questions. We'll give you answers next on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. 314-399-9646 is the place to do those. Guys, do you think that Oregon will win the national title? I do.
I've seen a lot of flaws for a lot of other teams in college football, not Oregon.
Yeah, I think it's Oregon's by far the best team in the country. I to your point, I don't see a flaw in that team.
Their flaws were the first 2 games of the season to where they didn't look good, and they still found a way to win.
And even in those games, like Idaho, throw it out. Weird game. Against Boise, it was because they just didn't convert on a bunch of 4th downs. That was it.
Yep.
When you don't convert on those, it makes the game a lot closer, and they're willing to do that. They're super aggressive, and that's probably the way that it happens. If they end up losing, it's probably because they got aggressive on like 4th and 3 from the 30-yard line in a college football playoff game. They don't convert, and that happens again later on in the game, and boom, instead of getting those like 6 points, which probably would have been necessary at the end of the game, they got none. The other team takes advantage, and that's the way they lose. But the alternative is they take those points, quote unquote, and it's like a 60% chance that you make the field goal. So I like the way they play. I think it's the right way to operate with the aggressive nature, but it does lead to a little bit more volatility in the end. That's the one way that I think they could potentially get beat. But other than that, I think they're the best team. They've got a really good defense. I think it's underrated on the defensive side of the ball. And I've said all year, I think Dylan Gabriel's amazing. I think he's one of the best. I think he might be the best college quarterback going this year. Not the best NFL prospect, but of the college quarterbacks that are playing today, I think he's the best.
I would agree with that. I haven't really seen another quarterback that, to me, has played better football than him.
Look at the drop-off from what OU was last year offensively to what they are this year without him.
And, like, maybe there's been at times where, like, Shedeur Sanders has had maybe one game or two where I look at it and go, okay, he's been better. But for the majority of the season, he reminds me so much of what Penix was at Washington. He's just going to sling it, man. And when he slings it, he's not just throwing the ball in dangerous spots and hoping for the best, man. He's picking apart defenses. And he's the biggest reason why I think they're the best team in the country and why they're going to win the championship.
I think he might be better than Bo Nix as a college quarterback. I know that the numbers won't be there, but...
What about NFL?
I don't think Gabriel's an NFL starter. I think Nix had a better opportunity to be an NFL starter. I don't feel that way.
Could he be an NFL starter?
I don't think so.
No.
I think he's a career backup. Like a 5th-round pick, 4th-round pick.
I'll take that. Go check out Chase Daniel.
Yeah, it's a good living when you can be an NFL
If I could turn back time, like Cher once said, I'd go back and learn to be a backup quarterback.
All right, from Harrison's brother master. If Jordan Kyrou has a bit... That's what it says. I don't know. If Jordan Kyrou... I'm guessing TMA texter. Is Jordan Kyrou a building block of this organization? Contrary to what Vitale just said, Kyrou hasn't changed at all, in my opinion. He's played 400 games in the league. He still does the same bleep. I do think, he's a building block.
And he doesn't do the same stuff. Sure, he's had a couple of turnovers, but do you know how many... Do you know how every single game 2 years ago we would come in and talk about how Jordan Kyrou's not even skating back to play defense? He's just sitting in the offensive zone. He's turned the puck over a couple of times. Man, I've been the biggest critic of Jordan Kyrou, but I believe you got to give him flowers when he plays well. That Boston Bruins game... He was everywhere. He was involved in forechecks. He was pushing guys off of pucks. He did not do that 2 years ago.
You're seeing little things, and I know Joey just described this as well as we possibly can, so I don't need to go through it all. But even beyond what you're seeing on the ice, hey, optional skates used to be very optional for Jordan Kyrou. He's out there now. It's a little thing, but I think it's representative of the mindset change. Mm-hmm. I just think he's in a better spot right now, and he feels like he has more ownership of the team than he previously did. And you're seeing a better version of Kyrou, and I think you will continue to see better versions of himself. I think he's absolutely a building block. I do not think he's Matthew Tkachuk. And this is where things get really difficult is, like, the expectations, I think, got out of whack for what he was supposed to be. Kind of reminds me a lot of what the Cardinals do for some of their prospects, where it's like, oh, this guy's going to be a 40-goal scorer consistently. Probably not. Probably a 30-goal scorer. Probably a 75-point producer on an annual basis. It's a really freaking good player, dude. That's worth $8 million. It's just maybe not a number one wing.
I think he's the same building block that Vladimir Tarasenko was.
You know what I would compare it to, Alex? Because that's a good one as well. He's Colton Parayko.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I don't think
Colton Parayko's a number one defenseman. I think he can be a top pair defenseman. He's a really good player, and you can win a cup with him as a building block of your team. I don't know that you can win a cup with him as your best defenseman.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Jordan Kyrou is. You can win a cup with him as a second line, top scoring threat on that line. Not sure you can win a cup with him as your top scoring threat on your top line.
Yeah.
That's how I would describe it.
And that's how I went with Vladdy. And I know people are going to be like, Vladdy scored 40 goals. I mean, Jordan Kyrou was close to 40 goals that first full season with the Blues. Now, is he taking a step back? Absolutely. But they were working on other areas of his game. But Vladdy was always around a 68 to 80 point player. And I think that's what Jordan Kyrou is. But you know what Vladdy was? He was a guy that you'd like on your first line, but in crucial moments, you'd kind of needed to bury him in certain situations because you didn't want him to make a mistake. And you know what happened? You had Perron, you had O'Reilly, you had other guys went out there that played those bigger minutes. That's what Jordan Kyrou seems to be. Can you win with him? I don't know because we haven't seen it. I think you can, but he cannot be your top line player. That you're still searching for.
Somebody on the text line said, so $8 million gets you, or excuse me, 70 points gets you $8 million now?
Yeah.
100%. That's the going rate, and especially when it's as long of a contract as what Jordan Kyrou signed. He's going to be signed for like the next 6 years. So in 2029, when he's what, 28, 29 years old?
Yeah.
He's going to be making $8 million when the cap has at that point gone up to like $110 million. So it'll be 7% of the cap. Yeah, that's 100% what the going rate is for a player that's getting you 75 points a year.
Think of it this way. Chandler Stevenson signed for $6.25 million. And last season, he had 16 goals and 51 assists.
And now, he's what, 31?
And he's 30 years old.
So you're expecting regression from that, not
so you're paying $2 more million for a guy who could realistically score you 15 to 20 more goals a season and pick up 20 to 30 more points a season for you. Yeah, that's exactly the going rate. This is like the Colton Parayko thing where he's an overpaid defenseman. He's $6.5 million. Those types of defensemen are paid $8 or $9 million right now in the NHL.
I get it. It's not what you remember from 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Like the money has gone up in such a significant way. But yeah, the $8 million is exactly what this kind of a player ends up going for on the open market. Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. In 15 minutes, we're going to get into some NFL quick hitters. But next, this market could be getting a little crowded. Not only for Nolan Arenado, but also for Ryan Helsley. We've got a couple of new names that might be added to the market. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. Alex, this market could be getting a little crowded for Nolan Arenado and Ryan Helsley. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. Got a little heated here in this studio between T-Bone and myself.
Again?
Seems to be a theme lately. T-Bone's getting
You're making a dumb trade.
britches.
Whoa. Hey, I tell you what, Alex is feeling pretty good watching you guys go back and forth. Just don't let him interrupt you.
Sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah,
Alex like, I'm just going to stay over
Sometimes
here.
it's good not to get mad, you know?
Until BK starts going, I wouldn't move any of these Blues players. And Alex is like, get rid of Kyrou.
No, man, Kairou's good. Didn't you just hear me defend him in the last segment?
You know what's funny?
Fraud.
I've tried to trade like all of the fan favorites. Meanwhile, I'm like, Kyra's the good one.
That's true.
Barbashev?
Get rid of
Outta
Barbashev
here.
immediately. Meanwhile, he's putting up like 12 goals already this season. But Kyrou, he's good. Let's keep him here.
Jake Neighbors, not a 40-goal scorer, more of a 20-goal scorer. And I got to say, I've been pretty much right on all of
Who's
these.
the Cardinals
Anyways,
player that he's
Robert
doing that
Thomas
for?
would have made him a 40-goal scorer.
Gorman.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody hates
And
Gorman.
Walker.
And Herrera.
Yeah, those are the guys like Herrera. Can't throw. I'm like, yeah, get him in the lineup.
Because like he's going to
Gorman,
be better.
not great defensively, strikes out 37% of the time. Guys, it's going to be fine. That's your starting second baseman.
He'll be
Jordan
better.
Walker has been sent down like every opportunity that he's come up to the big leagues. It's fine, guys. Everything's good. Nootbaar never stays healthy. Guys, he gets on base 37% of the time. How could you not want this guy to be around? So,
I can see why people get frustrated with you.
Yeah, I can see why you get under people's skin a lot.
me too, honestly. The market's getting a little crowded. So third base-wise, you've got Alex Bregman, who's out there as a free agent. Anybody can go out there and offer Alex Bregman a contract if they need him to be their third baseman. You're really good, younger than Nolan Arenado, more productive than Nolan Arenado, has that championship pedigree that Arenado, unfortunately, does not have. He is going to be tied to a QO, but that's it. Otherwise, you don't have to like trade something to be able to get his services. You just have to sign him. Well, now, T-Bone, you showed us this earlier today. There's a piece by the beat writer for the Minnesota Twins breaking down what they can do to shed payroll. Sounds like one of the options, maybe not the top option, but among the options is Carlos Correa potentially being dealt, and it's possible he can move over to third base instead of saying at shortstop. Well, that adds a pretty significant name to the third base market, and that would be an alternative to Nolan Arenado. Like, for example, the Dodgers. If you're the Dodgers and you hear, hey, there's an opportunity to trade for a third baseman. You can either get Nolan Arenado or you can get Carlos Correa. I'm guessing you side with the guy that is younger and cheaper and better. That would be my personal preference.
Doesn't he have injuries?
Man,
Injury history, though?
If I were Mo, I'd call him and go, you know 2 teams backed out of a deal, right, with him?
He's got injuries.
Yeah. Arenado doesn't have that. He just
Arenado
can't hit
plays
for
with a
power.
bad
Are we
back.
sure?
Well,
He plays through it because he's a grinder.
yeah.
So does Carlos Correa.
No, he
he's an
doesn't.
IL guy.
Yeah.
Also championship pedigree there, too.
Well, they cheated, though. Banged on
So
some
that's
trash
the-
cans.
Yeah,
High five,
that's
T-Bone.
true.
Call
Yeah.
out the cheaters, right?
Not a Hall of Famer because of it.
That's the third base market. Closer market is also getting pretty crowded. Ryan Presley from the Houston Astros potentially going to be available. Devin Williams, Brewers, potentially going to be available. You already have Tanner Scott on the market via free agency. Ryan Helsley potentially available. Did I miss somebody?
Camilo Duvall.
Duvall with the Twins, and then
Duran.
Duran with the Twins,
Duvall with the
Duvall
Giants.
with the Giants. It's 5-6 closers that might be available this offseason, including Ryan Helsley.
And I'll throw another name in there because they talked about trading him last offseason. Clase probably going to be on the market.
There you go. Especially after his postseason performance and everything that happened
Yeah.
there. Alex, are you starting to wonder if it's going to be harder than we expected to get rid of Nolan Arenado and or Ryan Helsley?
Yeah, well, I think harder to get rid of Arenado, yes. I'm starting to wonder if it's worth even putting Helsley on the market. Like, the difficult part with Arenado is there's 2 guys that are better options for any team that's interested in a third baseman on top of the amount of money that you have to bring in with Nolan Arenado, and you have to get him to agree to want to play there. There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through for Nolan Arenado, which makes me really believe that they're not going to be able to move this guy, and you might just be stuck with him in that position. The Helsley one, and I've been the biggest component of trade the guy because I don't want to go through the season and risk an injury and not get anything in return. But, man, with all of these guys available, and at the time it was Helsley or Devin Williams, and I was like, I would take Helsley over Devin Williams, mostly for how he performed this past season. But now when you're bringing in 4 or 5 other players and what all of those are going to command, at some point one team is just going to say, you know what, we'll take whatever it is. That's going to set the market for the closer, and it's going to push the Cardinals back. So I think I'm starting to get to the point where Ryan Helsley might be in the line of what you guys were thinking, where you might need to hold on to him until the trade deadline and then flip him.
Yeah, I think Arenado, the one for him, like I've just been skeptical that you're able to move on from him because of his contract and his decline in performance. So nothing's really changed for me on that front. But for Ryan Helsley, I've said all along, I don't know if I want to be the first team to trade my closer, just because I want to see what someone like Devin Williams gets in return. I think those other guys, I think they've got more control, so they're a little tougher to kind of judge. But it does come down to, okay, do I weigh the risk of playing him into the season, a guy that has had injury issues in the past? 2 years ago, dealt with forearm strain, if I remember correctly. He's had a knee injury before. Like, there are serious question marks to it. But with all these guys on the market, there's so much picking and choosing. I actually think you're probably in a better spot because he has less control, less for teams to give up. But that's why you almost probably want to wait till the deadline, right? Because once you get to the deadline, teams really start to get more aggressive. They try and make more moves. They're willing to give up a little bit more when they're really on a time crunch to try to get a guy that just has a second half to him. I think I'm at the point now where I probably hold on to Helsley until you get to the trade deadline, unless you're blown away by an offer. Or you see what the Brewers get. If the Brewers trade Devin Williams this offseason and say they get, 2 top 10 prospects from a team system, all right, now I've got a building block for what we want to accomplish in our trade with Ryan Helsley. Then maybe you start to explore it a little bit more now that you have a little bit better of an idea of what the market is for him.
Can I ask you guys a random question associated with this?
It's probably not that random.
Depends how random it is.
If you're able to move off of Arenado and Helsley, maybe one other, maybe like the Steven Matz deal, something like that, and the Twins calls you, said, hey, we need to move some money out.
Boy, are we your destination.
Are we?
We've got Carlos Correa and Pablo Lopez.
Oh, yeah.
A combined $58 million for next year.
Got to take both of them.
Got to take both.
Oh, out.
So
would you
out.
consider it if you're the Cardinals?
Not if
Are they taking Arenado off my hands?
Arenado's already dealt. Let's say separate deal. Arenado's gone, Helsley's gone, and Matz is gone. So you've removed $58 million bucks, so it's roughly 1 for 1. Like the money, it would end up being equal. It's money in, money out in this scenario. Pablo Lopez is 29 years old, I believe. Carlos Correa is right now going to be 30 years old next season. This is not something that I think the Cardinals would do. It's incredibly unlikely. But is it something that you would consider if you were in charge, Alex? Carlos Correa last year had 86 games played, hit .310 with a .905 OPS. That was 50% above league average. When healthy, big caveat, but when healthy over the last few seasons, had an OPS plus of 131, 138, 152, and 94 in one season where he was not very good offensively.
Man, I don't think I would. And it's not because of... I like the Pablo Lopez. I don't like that deal for Carlos Correa. And I mean, like, I know he's a better player than Nolan Arenado, but he's kind of in line of like he's 31 years old, he's 30 years old, and it's $31 million on your cash or your payroll hit. And like at least Nolan Arenado is not that much money. So I don't think I would do that. I would be interested in the Pablo Lopez part of this, but man, the Carlos Correa thing is... It reminds me a lot of, and it's not the same because Juan Soto was such an incredible player, but it reminds me a lot of the conversation we were having with Juan Soto and Patrick Corbin. And at the time, it's like, yeah, absolutely take on Patrick Corbin because your team's trying to compete and Juan Soto makes you better. Your team's not trying to compete. And I don't know if I would want Carlos Correa for the next 4 years at that contract.
And that's minimum because he's got vesting options where if he continues to play, I don't know if he actually would. He's not a guy that stays healthy all the time. But if he continues to play, it becomes like every year basically gets added on. Yeah. If he continues to
and that's not worth getting a Pablo Lopez. I would much rather go to a free agent market and just bring in like a Shane Bieber before I would do that deal for Pablo Lopez.
Somebody said, where is he playing? Are you going to move Win? No, you play him at third base. Yeah. And this would then...
You're defeating the purpose, though, of getting rid of Arenado.
Partially, yes. But I've got a stud. Like, if Carlos Correa is healthy, he's an all-star. That's what he is. He's one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball, and at the third base position, he would be a guy that is perennially... going to be contending for all-star appearances. And he's got championship pedigree, has been a proven leader in the past as well, brings all that stuff off to the, I know the cheating stuff, add that on there, but...
I almost went...
Let's go, Blues!
There you go. He's only 30. He's not that old. I would consider it, this is not something the Cardinals would ever do, so we don't have to spend much time on it, but I find it to be an interesting thought experiment because we were talking yesterday about, hey, how do they get creative? This would be one of those scenarios where you've moved off of the money, then you get a little younger. You do add in Pablo Lopez, who could be like, you got Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray. That's what the Twins had a few years ago with their front end of the rotation.
We're rebuilding the Twins.
Yeah, let's go. They were successful,
You add
right?
in Carlos Correa, your lineup suddenly gets really interesting because he can be a legit middle-of-the-order bat for you.
Do you flip Gorman
I
then?
think you could actually be a playoff team next year if you did this. So I think it becomes really interesting. I don't think it's something they will do or probably shouldn't do because there's so much downside with Carlos Correa. He might play 2 more years for you healthy, and then it's just a disastrous contract.
I have no interest in acquiring the Correa deal. If this was on the table, if I were advising Mo, I'd say no because Correa just scares the crap out of me with his injuries. I mean, he hasn't been able to stay healthy, and last year he really wasn't able to stay healthy. Yep. And when you start dealing with those foot injuries, which he has, I mean, we saw how that just completely destroyed the career of Alan Craig, right?
Yeah, he's termites in his ankle.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Effectively.
I know how to get rid of those.
Well, good. We're going to spray him?
No, it does not spray.
But that's the whole reason, I have no interest in the Correa deal. Now, if the Cardinals do want to get creative, and again, I think they need to be exploring these options of trying to be creative this offseason because though they had to cut payroll and get younger, they didn't have to do the cost-cutting measures that I was expecting, which was, you get a Cardinal and you get a Cardinal. I think they need to find a way to create a path for the Pablo Lopez if he is on the market because he's a young guy that is a ace or a number 2 at a minimum for you in your rotation. He's coming off of a down year with a 4.08 ERA, but covered 185 innings. He's 29 years old, and he's making like $21 million for the next 3 years. So not only am I acquiring a guy that when the Gray contract does come up, would be the leader of the rotation. In fact, was viewed more as the number 1 than Sonny Gray was in their time together in Minnesota. Lopez started game 1 compared to Sonny Gray starting game 2 in their wild card round. Now I've got a guy that's here for 3 years on a better contract than Sonny Gray, if we're being honest. He's making less money than him and arguably could have better stuff than Sonny Gray at times. And then when that contract's up, he's 32 years old. Now there's also a chance for me to re-sign him. He fits into the core, so maybe we're not good for 2-3 years while he's here. But then if you can re-sign him and he's still effective, now I've got a guy here that is going to be part of the winning when the Cardinals are ready to kind of revamp this thing in this refresh. I think Pablo Lopez, that's the kind of move. We had the conversation of who's someone that you get creative for. You know, you move some money out, but then maybe you bring in some money. He's a guy. Pablo Lopez is on the market. I know it sounds like 2022 and I was trying to trade for him. He's the guy you need to target.
But you're doing for a reason. It's because he's in that age range to the kind of similar to what we were talking about with the Blues, where they were like, hey, we need guys that are like 25 to 28 years old in their primes, can be here for the next 5 years. So the Cardinals should be targeting this offseason too. If they decide to make additions, if they're able to shed a bunch of payroll and then they become opportunistic shoppers. Where it's like, hey, if somebody is selling low on an asset because they're over leveraged, they don't have the money to be able to take it on anymore. They previously did, and then the market shifted on. They're like, oh, bleep. Similar to a Nolan Arenado situation 2.0. The Cardinals should be the type of team that looks into that. I don't know if they will, but Pablo Lopez is exactly the kind of player that they should be looking at. And whether it's him, Correa, somebody else, I think the pitching side is probably more likely and probably the better way to look at this because they have so many position players they need to find out on next year. If Lopez actually becomes available, I think that's something the Cardinals should absolutely consider. It's a really good point by you. All right, coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Let's get into some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN. All right, let's dive into some NFL quick hitters with Alex and T-Bone. It's BK. I'm BK. BK.
I'm T-Bone.
You are struggling.
Oh, boy, I just need to go to the doctor. All right, Alex, there was a report yesterday. Aaron Rodgers was asked, hey, are you planning to come back next year? And he said, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I got to get my darkness retreat first, find out what that talks about, and then, He's
about to be 41 years old. He's not having a good season. The Jets are terrible. If you're the Jets, do you want to sign up for another year of Aaron Rodgers?
You don't have a choice. You're paying him either way. You're screwed either way. I don't want that player anymore, but, man, you've put all your eggs into that basket. You fired Robert Saleh. You've brought in another guy who's getting a lot of money so that Aaron Rodgers is better. You got to live with this now. And didn't I see it correctly? Like, if he were to just retire, they're still paying him $40 million.
And contracts are guaranteed.
So you better hope that you got a great draft pick. But guess what? We talked about this. The quarterbacks stink in this draft class. So, yeah, if I got my best shot to win, it's probably with Aaron Rodgers. It's
$50 million if they were to cut or trade him prior to June 1st next year against the cap.
And 40 if he retires?
It's the same. I think it's 50.
Oh, it's the same no matter what? Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're stuck. You went out there, you gave him the money, you've changed, and maybe they should have fired Robert Saleh, but you've directed everything towards Aaron Rodgers. Now you got to live with it.
Their problem is, so they put a bunch of void years on his contracts, and this is something that the Saints do with a bunch of their deals. Basically put something on a credit card and they put it out in future seasons so that way it doesn't hit all at one time. They are all in on the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. Like, they can't get out of this thing, dude. So I guess you technically want him to be back next year. This could not have gone any worse for the Jets. It could not have gone worse. They're stuck. There's nothing they can do.
Could you cut him post June 1st? Because
I mean, technically, yes.
Because it says, I mean, if this is right, $17 million is his dead cap
for next year and the year after.
I think
it's doable.
I think that's probably your route then.
Would you consider it?
Yeah, I'd blow it up.
Especially if you have like a top 10 pick.
Yeah. I don't know if you end up landing the quarterback or not, but I can bring in another asset, and then rather than running it back with Rodgers,
one more year
can't really play. Yeah, I'd cut Aaron Rodgers and just figure out my quarterback situation from there, and even then explore like a trade for Devontae Adams. Like I'd blow it up. It's clearly the worst thing they can do is, I think there's three paths. One is the one you're currently on, which is Aaron Rodgers runs the team. That's clearly not working. Who would have thought that? Second is, okay, fine, we'll bring back Aaron Rodgers, but we're doing it our way. We are going to build the team we want. So no more little friends.
You can't do that.
But
with him in charge.
And that's why it's not going to work. I would cut him. I think you've got to go your separate ways. It's clearly not worked. And I don't know how you get better because you're only getting older the more you bring back Rodgers, bring back Adams, bring back his besties. I think you have to cut Aaron Rodgers. Post June 1st designation, you just take your medicine on the $17 million
embrace the
dead
suck
cap.
then, because it's going to be a rough few years.
It's going to be a rough few years, though.
No matter what, yeah.
And eventually you're going to have to be able to move on.
Daniel Jones, come on down. You're a Jet.
Oh, just stay in New York,
Shador, draft Cam Ward, draft, one of these guys that's coming into the...
Hell, draft Shador and bring his dad with him. Maybe his dad will spark a little excitement.
In New York, that would be an absolute disaster.
Oh, man.
He's seen all those reports, by the way. That's going to be... The next 6 months are going to be miserable because it's just going to be Shador Sanders, Dion. Where are they going together, right? Do you guys remember this time last year? Caleb Williams never going to be playing for Chicago. Doesn't want to play for the Bears.
Because he wants a stake in the team.
Yeah, like... If you can ignore the noise on Shador Sanders for the next 6 months, just do that. We're going to try our best to do so. It's going to be newsworthy, so we're going to have to talk about it to a degree. But it's going to be more nauseating than the Bronny James stuff. It absolutely will.
Well, he got his way.
Yeah, he's not even traveling right now.
It's a little different because there was not a demand for Bronny. There's a demand for Shador. That's what's so different about this.
Not as high a demand. But there were teams that were like, hey, we're going to draft Bronny in the second round.
In the late second round.
Yeah,
Shador's a top 10 pick, potentially.
Sure. But then we had the whole Bronny, oh, no, he won't sign with you if you... similar in LeBron guy's way. Not as high of a draft pick, but...
Yeah, I think that's the key difference here. When you're a late second round pick, there's like a 5% chance that you make an NBA team. If you're a top 10 pick in the NFL, not only are you making the team, you will be the team's starting quarterback next year. Teams aren't just avoiding you because you're like, oh, I want to play with my daddy. No, stop. You're going to go where they pick you.
Never use that voice and sentence again in my life.
I thought it sounded a lot like Bronny.
It's so frustrating, some of the noise that's taking place with that. Anyways, Commanders versus Eagles later on tonight. This is actually a really good Thursday night football game, like a legit great game. The winner of this will be the number 2 seed in the NFC right now. Will take over the lead effectively of the NFC East. Do you guys have a side on this that you like? Eagles are a 4-point home favorite right now.
Mine's the Commanders, and I know they just fell to the Steelers, but they were in that game with Pittsburgh, and I'm still not sold on Philadelphia, and I understand that they've been clicking on all cylinders. Their offense looks great. I don't trust Nick Sirianni.
Nor should you.
And so that's why I'm going to side with Dan Quinn. I'm going to side with that offense. And Lattimore's playing in this game, correct?
I think last I saw he's like questionable, but I'm not sure on the official update.
Regardless, I'm gonna side with Washington on this one. I think they win it. I think they're the better team.
So I think the Commanders cover the spread. I don't think they win. I think this is going to be a close game, and I like the Eagles by like a field goal.
Lattimore out officially.
Okay.
I just think Philadelphia's playing really good football right now. And for the offense for Washington, seems to start to be stagnating just a little bit. And that's why I think Philadelphia's going to come out on top in this one. Again, I think it's going to be a close game, but I actually like Philadelphia to come away with victorious tonight.
I think I like Philly as well. I just wonder if Jaden Daniels is starting to get healthy again. I don't know if you guys saw the video yesterday of Jaden Daniels. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm back. I think Jaden Daniels was just hurt. His ribs were messed up, and he played through it because he's tough as nails, and he found a way to get him through a 2-1 stretch and nearly won last week against Pittsburgh. Really good defense. Since they still put up 27 against that really good defense in Pittsburgh. Philly's playing great defense right now as well, although I don't know how much to buy into this. They've played against Cleveland, the Giants. That's impressive. Gave up only 17 points in that game. But then Jacksonville and Dallas, I just don't know how much to believe in the defense, how much of this is actually real for them. I'm fascinated. I would not bet on this game, honestly, would be my true answer. But if I was having to pick a side, I think I would go with the Eagles.
Scared money don't make money, man.
Hell yeah, parlay it.
Oh,
I think I would take the under. It's a 49.5 point total.
First touchdown score, Jaden Daniels.
I would go first touchdown scored in this game, Brian Robinson Jr.
I'm back in the caboose. I'm pushing in Hurts for my first touchdown. Push!
Heard BK saying in a high-pitched voice, Daddy, T-Bone in a deep voice yelling, push. We might need to wrap this segment.
You think they do that when they do it?
No, I can tell you for a fact, you don't yell that.
The Toronto Maple Leafs have completely... Yeah, that's not your job, sir. They have completely altered the way that they're playing this year under Craig Berube. Is there anything about this that the Blues can emulate in future seasons? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendricks here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Blues visit the Sabres tonight, and we'll have pregame coverage starting at 5:30 with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Kerber for Puck Drop at 6:30. This Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So, Alex, there was a really good piece over in Sportsnet on the changes that Craig Berube has made for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And there are some Maple Leafs fans that are not thrilled about these changes. Let me read you a bit. This comes from Justin Bourne, who writes for Sportsnet. At 5-on-5, the Leafs dump it in 59% of the time when they enter the zone.
Tell me your Craig Berube-styled hockey without telling me.
Only 3 teams in the NHL dump the puck in more often than the Toronto Maple Leafs so far this season. The Leafs are 31st in the league in odd man rushes. The Leafs, last year, they were top 3, now 31st in the league. As a result, they're also 29th in rush chances, and it goes for the other side as well. They also are 11th in the league in rushes against. So what that means is there's almost no rush opportunities for the Leafs or against the Leafs in their games. Meanwhile, previously, this was the exact way that they were winning and losing hockey games when they weren't coached by Craig Berube. His style is working, though. They are an effective hockey team. They're second right now in their division in the Eastern Conference. If you look at goals against per game, 6th in the NHL. You look at slot shots, which is basically high danger chances, right? 4th in the league. Slot passes, 5th in the league. Rush chances, 4th. Rebound chances, 6th. High danger chances, 4th. In almost every defensive category that you care about as a hockey coach, they're top 5 to 7 in the NHL. The Toronto Maple Leafs have become the 2019 St. Louis Blues. Despite having Austin Matthews and all of this star power up front, they are playing very disciplined, grinded out, heavy hockey. They have taken on Craig Berube's identity and completely bought in to what he is selling. They are playing Florida Panthers hockey.
Yep.
They're doing exactly what Paul Maurice brought to Florida. But they're doing it without players that you would typically expect to play that way, Alex. That's what I find so fascinating. It's not surprising to me when Alexander Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk are playing a heavy style. When you see that from Nyes and Matthews and Nylander,
Mitch Marner,
that's a little different to me. The reason I wanted to bring this up here in St. Louis is not only the Craig Berube tie-in, but also because I'm curious, do you think this is something that could happen for the Blues? Because right now they're just not a good offensive team. Like it's not about their rush chances. It's not about any one way they're playing. They're just not good offensively. But eventually, I think when you look at the talent on this team, I would think, they're probably more rush-driven than they are 5-on-5 cycle game, dump the puck in. But I would think the same thing about the Maple Leafs, and they're able to make this adjustment. Does it give you hope, give you belief? Is there anything that we can learn about the Blues' future from what the Maple Leafs are doing right now in their change in identity?
I mean, yes and no. I'm torn with this one because on the Berube with the Maple Leafs and why they're embracing it, this is why they hired Craig Berube. I interviewed James Myrtle, who's the insider for The Athletic that covers the Maple Leafs for that last Blues and Maple Leafs game. And I asked him how the Craig Berube tenure is going in St. Louis. And he answered, he said, I think it's fine, but nobody cares about what Berube does in the regular season. What Berube is doing, he's got them playing postseason hockey in November. It's a tough brand of hockey to play, and it's tough to sustain that all season long, but this is a team that needs to understand how to play that way so that they can win in the postseason, which is what they've suffered from. So it makes sense that they're doing this right now, and honestly, it makes sense because that team is bought in. Because you've lost in the first round basically every single season since Austin Matthews has been with that team. And at some point, you got to say, guys, we're done with this losing. Let's try something different. So on that side of it, I do think that's where there's optimism for the Blues. Because at some point, you're going to get sick of losing. And I know people are probably like, well, shouldn't you be sick of losing now? Absolutely, which is why I believe all of these hiccups in their development is so infuriating. But in the Blues' defense, they don't have all of the pieces in place at the NHL level that they're expected to win with. But on the other side of why I'm not so optimistic about that this brand works is, one, Craig Berube has pedigree. And I'm not trying to discount Drew Bannister, but when Craig Berube steps into a locker room and says, this is how you have to play to win, you listen, because he just won a Stanley Cup 5 years ago. And when you find that, coach, a roster is more willing to listen to it. Ken Hitchcock was the same way in St. Louis. Langenbrunner told us that. When Ken Hitchcock stepped into that locker room in 2011, 2012, it was, hey, you want to win, you got to change your brand of hockey. And what did the Blues do? They said, cool, we'll embrace it. And they had success with it. But I also go back to Berube's comment that he told us when we had him on, and he said, Austin Matthews is one of the best leaders I've ever been around. The dude works his ass off in terms of every single practice and everyone around that sees it. I'm not saying the Blues don't have those guys in terms of leadership, but I don't know if you have the same guys that respond the way that the Maple Leafs do in terms of watching their leaders on the ice go out to work every day.
We got a text from the 618 and 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. Guys, what it teaches us is that we should have kept Craig Berube and traded Jordan Kyrou. That was the mistake. I feel like that's the opposite of the lesson that I learned from the Maple Leafs example. The Maple Leafs example is, hey, if we get the right guy in here to coach these guys up and to play the right way, and to your point, Alex, a guy that has the pedigree that will convince them, hey, this is what we have to do in order to win, similar to Paul Maurice down in Florida. Now, they also had a turnover in personnel. That was important, but Paul Maurice was a guy that could bring that pedigree to them. Craig Berube did it in Toronto. They kept the dudes. Like, the Toronto media has talked about Marner and Nylander the same way that we do here in St. Louis with Jordan Kyrou.
The moment Berube signed there was when trade speculation became Marner's gone, because Marner's not a Berube guy. And you know what Berube said about that? No, Marner can play this style of hockey. We just got to teach it to him.
100%. And maybe it was just not the right time for Jordan Kyrou. Maybe it takes failure with him not just being a guy on the team. Because really, the last 2 years is the first time that it's been Kyrou and Thomas's team. And as you go through some struggles with that, as you get into failures as the faces of the franchise, that's when I think it takes on a new life of, okay, we got to look in the mirror and ask real questions about ourselves. What are we doing wrong? What can we do better? And so that, to me, Alex, is where you get to the place of, I don't think this is something that happens now. But you look ahead a year or two, I do think the Blues could follow a similar type of a model. I don't know what that means for Drew Bannister. And I feel bad saying this. This is not me being critical of Bannister necessarily, but we kind of all knew this when he was hired. This has the chance to be a Payne 2.0 situation where eventually he's the guy that gets you to the guy.
Yeah. You're spot on. Like, again, just to comp it to the Ken Hitchcock, and when we talked to Jamie Langenbrunner, like, that was a team that had lost 4 out of 5 seasons in terms of missing the playoffs. They got one taste of it, and you remember our interview with Backus last year, who said that 08-09 season was so influential for us because we saw the postseason, but we also got our butts kicked against Vancouver and said, well, we got to figure out a different brand of hockey to play. They suck for the next season. Then they go under 500 the start of the season. Ken Hitchcock steps in, and then all of the veterans are like, hey, you guys want to win? He's going to show you how, and everybody embraced it. That's part of the reason why I do find the playoffs to be so impactful for this team to get there now.
Sure. And
it's why I understood why they put the pressure on the team of saying, like, hey, we expect you to be a playoff team. Because at some point, you gotta feel what losing in the postseason feels like. Losing in the regular season is a dangerous game to play, because then you just get to this mindset of, yeah, we're just a bad team. And then you get stuck and lose the mindset of how to win, and then you got to reset everybody's brains in terms of winning hockey. But when you're getting to the playoffs and you're losing in the first round after first round after first round, you taste that success, but you're like, well, how do we get to the next level? And that's when you look at the roster and you're like, man, we're not all committed to this. And that's where that buy-in comes in. And that's what I thought took place with Toronto with Berube.
Somebody on the text line, and T-Bone, I want to get your thoughts on this as well. From the 618, BS. Guys, Kyrou can't play that type of game. It's just the reality. I just don't believe that.
He's been playing that type of game.
We said the same thing about Vladimir Tarasenko. We said some of these things about other players, and then eventually you saw, like, oh, it can work. It's hard to see it until it all clicks into place. It's really hard to see the vision. Like, you think Detroit Lions fans are super excited about Jared Goff and Dan Campbell and this vision that they had in place for this version of the team? Hell no. Of course not. That trade for Jared Goff was really just a trade for draft picks, and the Rams had to include Goff in it for cap reasons. And the Lions were like, yeah, there might be something here. He's a former top pick. Maybe we can get something out of this. Worst case scenario, he's a bridge quarterback to get to our next guy. And then eventually it worked out. And now they're a Super Bowl favorite, dude, with that guy in place. The reason I bring that up is because I don't think it's easy to see, and I'm not trying to like lecture anybody, but I don't think it's easy to see when you've got the right pieces in place until you've got all of it in place. It's hard to see when you've got a missing spot as the second line center. Oh, this is how it clicks into place. If I dropped Robert Thomas 2.0 into that second line center position right now, and I put the 24-year-old version, 25-year-old version of David Perron onto that top line, suddenly this looks a lot different. If then you add in a legit second pair defenseman, it's like, oh, okay, the Blues are a contender now. They're not there yet. They need to add those pieces. They hope that they have them internally. If they don't, they're going to have to go out and get them. But I do think Kyrou can play that game. I think it's going to take some time. It's going to take some more failure for him to get there. But when I see this from Toronto, it makes me more optimistic that with failure, with time, he can get there.
And I think that failure has to come in the postseason. Because, right, you can win games in the regular season playing any style hockey you want. We saw the Blues win. It didn't matter at the time, but we saw them win with the pond hockey style, 2 years ago? During the Vrana, Kapanen first claimed them, and you can say, well, they were out of it. What did it matter? You can win pond hockey in the regular season. It's what Toronto did. It's why they were so good at it, right? They played pond hockey. I think the constant failure in the postseason is the one that changes things because you just work so hard for 82 games to just have an opportunity to be one of half of the teams that get the opportunity to play in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And what did Toronto have constantly happen? Going home 4 games in, going home 6 games in, going home 5 games in.
Colorado, Edmonton, same thing.
I think that's where it changes. You know, I think you can win with multiple styles in the regular season. And maybe Kyrou starts to show signs of it. Nobody's going to play 82 games of that playoff style hockey in the regular season. It's hard. It hurts. Going in, getting in on the forecheck. There are games you're going to want to play more of that pond hockey style. I think where it really sets in is failure in the postseason. And that's why I do agree with Alex of this team needs to get to the postseason. Maybe not this year, maybe more of a next year kind of a conversation. But they need to get there, and they need to start, it sounds weird to say it, they need to start experiencing some losing in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Somebody on the text line said, how much more failure does Jordan Kyrou need? He's been failing for the last few seasons. I just totally disagree with that. I think you also have to understand the mindset of a player at his age. He was 23 years old, came into the league, had 75 games, put up 75 points, was a plus 10 on the ice. His bleep don't stink. That's the mindset after that, right? Like, I've got this. 27 goals in my first real season in the NHL.
Yeah, remember where he was playing that first real season in the NHL. He was playing third-line minutes.
And then the next year, plays like essentially top-line minutes, 18 minutes a game, puts up 37 goals, 73 points. Yeah, he's a minus 38 on the ice, gets handed a massive contract. But that's the result. So why would I think of that as being a failure when my team clearly views it as being a huge success? And then last year was different. Coach gets fired, you're through all of this controversy with the comments that you made, you're getting more criticism. He was clearly frustrated by it. He came into this year, and I think he's become a better player. And I think this year you're seeing, it's not failure all the time, but it's little moments, especially at the end of the game where those moments are magnified, and he's having to come into these games afterwards and say, I screwed up. These are the kinds of things that can lead to real growth. I think we've already seen a better version of Jordan Kyrou. And I think we'll continue to see a better version of him. But I think it's unfair to say that he's just failed each of the last few seasons. I don't think he views it that way.
Well, and we got a text once again. Harrison's brother Master is having himself one fine day right now. He's typing in a lot of all caps with us. But he's like, you guys are literally the only people who believe in this guy. We interviewed multiple national analysts last season because, remember, I questioned him as a top-line player. And I remember we asked Jeff Merrick. We asked a couple of different individuals from NHL Network, including Scott Hartnell, is Jordan Kyrou a top-line player? And every single one of them, without hesitating, was like, absolutely. Now, I think a lot of Blues fans have fallen victim to only seeing the bad and
100%
hindsight of remembering how bad he was last season, and then the Berube thing set him over the top. And we even talked this year, is there anything Kyrou could do to get in good graces with fans? But this is going to sound BK, so understand where I'm coming from. I'm going to try and do the best Tony thing here.
Unbelievable.
Pay closer attention to what he's doing on the ice. Let's not watch the game. Let's pay closer attention to what he's doing on the ice.
Let's kind of watch the game.
It kind of was. So 3 years ago when he had that incredible season as his first full year, you know how many hits he had through the first 16 games?
3.
4.
It'd be low.
The next season, how many do you think he had?
Through the first 16?
4.
5?
8. The next season, how many do you think he had?
I'll just keep going. 10.
9. The next season, this season, how many do you think he's gotten?
25.
16.
Damn.
So you're close. But, and I know hits aren't everything, but, and look, like it's hard because like everybody's biased on how you judge a hit.
Here you go. In 2023, he had 14 hits for the season. He has 15 hits so far this year.
Yeah. You're seeing him get more involved. And I know it doesn't feel like it's growth because, again, you're looking back to what last year was. It's like, this guy doesn't fight hard. He gives up pucks. He's changed all of that this season. The points are there. The play is there. But you already have this, I don't want to say hatred, but you have this sour taste in your mouth of Jordan Kyrou. That's not going to go away from what he does in one game because he's done it his whole career. This is what happened with Eric Brewer. It's what happened with Jay Bouwmeester, to where it was like, this guy sucks. You're not having success with him on the ice in certain areas. And if you just pay closer attention, he's getting more involved in the corner plays than he ever has before. There's no floating through the offensive zone. It's going in, retrieving pucks, and then getting back. A couple of mistakes have put Jordan Kyrou in the spotlight once again. And unfortunately for him, there's not much you can do when you don't have a Robert Thomas and a Philip Broberg and all of these guys to mask those mistakes.
That's what I was about to say. It's really hard for me to be overly critical of Kyrou when you're missing 2 of your top 6 players right now. Not in injuries. You don't have two players that should be in the top 6. You don't have a second line center. Currently, you don't have a top 6 center. And you don't have a top line winger. That's where this team's at. And so it becomes extremely hard to be able to really evaluate what you have in Kyrou and Boo, any of these guys because of that. All right, he's Alex's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, we got to dive into the junk drawer with a fight coming up this weekend that I don't understand that Alex is going to explain to me because I've never seen him this excited about anything. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK. I got to tell you about how you can unlock your inner champion. The place to do so is Victory Men's Health. Check them out today for great locations across the St. Louis area and online at victorymenshealth.com. It's a super easy process. You book now, go into their website. Again, victorymenshealth.com. Top right corner, you can see a tab that says book now. Put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with 101 ESPN sent you, and tell them a little bit about what it looks like for you to unlock your inner champion, whether that's weight loss goals that you've been trying to meet on your own. You just can't do it. You need a little bit of help. Give Victory Men's Health a chance. They'll be able to help you out with that. Low testosterone is an issue for a lot of guys my age and certainly older. If you want to check them out for that, they will take those levels, find out where you're at. There's a big range for testosterone. Sometimes guys are in the lower range of that. They can help you get back up towards the top end of that range. Erectile dysfunction, they can help you out with that. Or maybe you just want to learn a little bit about their red light therapy or their vitamin infusions. All available for you at Victory Men's Health. Check them out today at victorymenshealth.com. That's victorymenshealth.com. All right, I need some help in many different ways, including this cough. I'm going to urgent care after the show today. But I really need help, Alex, in understanding why, according to a BetMGM senior trader, the expectation is Jake Paul, Mike Tyson will be the most bet on boxing match in BetMGM history. Quote, bettors want to see Paul get knocked out and love Tyson as the underdog. The books will be rooting for Paul to win.
Nailed it.
Alex, this is tomorrow night.
Uh-huh.
It's going to be one of the most viewed boxing matches in probably 20 years.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me what the appeal is of this? Like, why is it? And I'm not talking down to anybody here. I want to make that very clear.
Yeah.
I don't understand. This is not a you problem. This is very much a me problem. What am I missing here?
I think there's two sides to this coin. One is what you just said. A lot of people dislike Jake Paul and want to see him get knocked out. Because remember, like, I believe Jake Paul has not lost a boxing match. Correct. But he's done these, like, setup boxing matches where it's been against guys. It's like, why is he fighting him?
Like this?
Sure.
A 58-year-old Mike Tyson?
Sure.
Who was in his prime 30 years ago?
Sure. But I don't know if you guys have seen any of these videos of Mike Tyson, like, working out, prepping for this. Mike Tyson could be 58 years old all you want, but that punch is still lethal.
Did you see his last boxing match? It was horrific. It was one of the worst sporting events I've ever seen put on television.
Was that the Holyfield one?
Yes. It was horrible. Okay. It was embarrassing to watch. Like, nobody should have been a part of that. And it's not a shot against Mike Tyson. The guy is unbelievable, and what he did as a boxer is as much fun. I remember, Alex, we were talking about this before the show today. It was a little before T-Bone's time to really get into sports, but the early 2000s was my own personal experience watching Mike Tyson. I remember him against Lennox Lewis. Like, that was one of the opportunities. With my stepdad, I was downstairs in the basement. It was my first real, like, huge boxing match that I understood what was going on. So, like, I have some Tyson memories. Not in his prime, because that was when I was, like, 3. This does nothing for me, man. He's 58.
See, it does everything for me. Like, I've already planned out my evening so that I can watch this fight, because the other side of that coin is I just want to see Mike Tyson fight again. I didn't see the Holyfield one, but frankly, I think that Holyfield one, I knew what was that. That was a cash grab to where it was like, these are just two old dudes that are going to reminisce. This one, I do think Mike Tyson has a little hatred towards the other side, and I remember being 6, 7, 8 years old watching old fights of Mike Tyson. I played the video game, Mike Tyson Punch-Out. Like, I did it all. So this is a little bit of childhood, Alex, getting to watch Mike Tyson fight. And I don't care how old he is, Mike Tyson's punch is still probably one of the most lethal things out there. And I'm just hoping to see it land. That's what this is. This isn't like a UFC where it's like, oh, man, I wonder who's going to win. I don't really care who's going to win. I want to see Mike Tyson, and I'd like to see him land a punch on Paul.
Maybe it's just because I've never, been much into boxing, but, like, I got excited for when McGregor fought, who was it? Mayweather, yeah. Like, that one I kind of got excited about because it's two big names. I understand these are two big names. I don't have the appeal. And to me, I think it is I feel bad for a 60-year-old having to go out there and box. I can't imagine. And Mike Tyson had an episode, quote unquote, a couple months ago where they were like, "Yeah, we might have to delay this thing." I don't know. I don't have the appeal because I think he's going to get destroyed in the ring.
Oh, see, I don't. I think he's gonna have success, and I do think the reason this is going to be.
I think it's all fixed. Like, I don't think this is a real match.
I thought every fight that Jake Paul has been a part of has been fixed. That's part of it with this.
He's going to lose to Tyson.
I can't imagine betting on this. I can't imagine.
You feel like you're betting on the WWE?
Yes.
It does feel that way a little bit. I will say the reason this is going to be so popular, because somebody brought up Mayweather versus McGregor, and that's like the last big fight that I can remember boxing-wise. But you've got...
It's really unfortunate that that's where we have arrived with boxing, because it used to be such a cool sport,
a big thing, but this was why. A guy like Mike Tyson took the sport by storm, and I mean, Mayweather did that. Nobody else has really done that.
Like, there's another big MMA card this weekend. I'm far more interested in that than I am in what's going to happen with this celebrity boxing match. Like, this feels to me like Celebrity Deathmatch on MTV when we were growing up, which was all fake.
I love Celebrity Deathmatch.
And it feels far more close to that.
Well, of course it was fake. They were clay figures that were fighting each other. But I got to watch Jay Leno fight David Letterman, and it was incredible.
What I'm saying is this boxing match between Mike Tyson and Jake Paul feels closer to Celebrity Deathmatch than it does to the MMA fights that we're going to watch on Saturday.
Well, then you know what, BK? Let's get it on. Nobody gets that reference unless you've seen Celebrity Deathmatch.
I didn't get it, but I kind of liked it.
No idea what we're talking
I
about.
love
Right
that. I used to like watch at 9 o'clock at night because you don't want to let your parents know you're watching Celebrity Deathmatch. 9 o'clock MTV, Celebrity Deathmatch, then 10 o'clock South Park.
Coming up next, has it actually been a down year for the NFL, or is that just a talking point on social media right now? We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. Alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. So has it actually been a down year in the NFL? Because that's been the talk on social media over the last few days. That, hey, product stinks. It's terrible. Look at all these 2 or 3 win teams. How could you possibly watch for hours on end on Sunday? I don't feel that way, Alex. Maybe I'm alone in this, and I'm also I love watching NFL football. So that may be hindering my ability to see this, although I have in the past been like, there's a couple of years ago when all of the quarterbacks got hurt where it's like, man, this product is terrible. It's just not fun to watch on Sundays. There's like 5 teams that have functioning offense. It's not really worth watching. I don't feel that way this year because I think most of the teams that have won at least 4 games are at least compelling in some way. I don't find the Colts to be particularly compelling, but other than that.
Are you kidding me? They're like Days of Our Lives NFL edition right now.
Yeah. Welcome back to the lineup, Anthony Richardson.
Who wasn't going to play again this season because he didn't understand football.
These are the teams that have won 4 or 5 games in the NFL other than the Colts. Bucks, Bengals, Seahawks, Rams, Bears, Broncos, 49ers. I find all of them to be at least semi-compelling. Now, what has happened this season is you have a swath of the league, which is at 2 or 3 wins, and we're 10 weeks into the season. That's a lot of teams. So it's Miami, Dallas, the Jets, New England, New Orleans, Carolina, Cleveland, Tennessee, Las Vegas, New York, and Jacksonville. That's 11 teams with 3 or fewer wins. That's a bad look. And it's, I think, double the number of teams that we had at this point in the season last year. So I get how you see that and be like, bunch of teams that have no chance to make the playoffs, bad season for the NFL. Alex, that's basically both sides of this argument. Where do you come out on this? Do you think it is a quote-unquote down year for the NFL in terms of the product on the field?
I don't feel that way. I feel like there's probably been like 2 weeks this season where I've looked at the slate of games and been like, man, there's like one game I want to watch. Most of the time this year it's been, man, I'm torn on how I'm going to watch all of these games. And that's where you turn on Red Zone or whatever it might be. And that kind of tells you, because there have been seasons in the past where it's like, I don't want to watch any of these teams right now. I think the storylines are what's really compelling about this season. And there are a lot of 2 to 3 loss teams, and you look at them, but you also look at the narratives. Let's just look at the NFC, for example. Like the NFC West is competitive from top to bottom in terms of who could win that division. The NFC North is another one where there are 3 teams that are fighting for a top spot right now. You go over to the AFC. We're having a conversation of who could be an MVP in terms of Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. There's an undefeated team that could go undefeated all season. Maybe it's felt like the product's down because there are so many bad teams. But even with those bad teams, I still feel like the narrative is pretty you gravitate towards all of the storylines, even with these awful teams.
So I think I'm going to say the product's down. I do think it is still very enjoyable to watch. Like, I still love locking it on Sundays. But here's why I think the product is, I wasn't even going to put the word down in air quotes for this. There's no big, like, fun, sexy, high-flying team in football this year. And I think
his offense is down?
I don't know if it's that offense is down, but it's just like the teams that you would think of that as. Miami hasn't really been that team this year. San Francisco hasn't been that,
you don't think
Baltimore's
team this year?
that?
Baltimore's that, though.
I even think Baltimore and the Bills have been that.
Baltimore, the funny thing with Baltimore is when I think Baltimore, I think run first. And that's not big and sexy. I don't think like
Lamar has thrown over the last 5 weeks for 350, 320, 280, 290, 280, 290.
And I think Detroit's been that high-flying team.
I still don't know if I view Baltimore as like the big sexy team. For some reason, like when I think of like last year,
interesting,
Miami was more of that team. You got the cheat motion, Tyreek Hill and the cheetah just running out there crazy. I view them more as a run-first team. And then like when I look at some of the teams that are good this year, that are like in first place in their division, Buffalo, yeah, they got Josh Allen, but they've really wanted to run the football this season. When you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, let's just be, they're not a fun product to watch.
But Baltimore is in
games
second in their division,
defense.
and they are fun to watch.
I look at a team like the Kansas City Chiefs. Look, in theory, they're supposed to be this team. They've got Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the NFL. He hasn't played that great this year. Let's just be honest. He hasn't played that great. It's been the defense that's won football games. The LA Chargers, they're like the Iowa football team in the NFL, where they are just going to run the ball down your throat. I think that's what has made the product, quote-unquote, less enjoyable is I think you're seeing the shift back to the running game, and that's what's really changing this.
Beyond that, I think what's really shifting the narrative is 2 of the teams that get to discuss the most that have completely underwhelmed relative to expectations. It's the Jets and the Cowboys. And I think that's hindering people's ability to see what the rest of the league has done, because the Jets take up so much oxygen and they are a disaster. In every possible way, they have been a disaster so far this year. 3-7 on the season. The offense is horrific. Defense hasn't been as good as expected. And then the Cowboys are one of the 3 worst teams in the NFL right now, probably. And their offense has been a disaster as well. And their defense, they can stop anybody. So I think that has a part to do with it. I think what you're saying is true, T-Bone. You don't have... It's not only that you don't have that high-flying offense, because, like, I'm not sure last year necessarily that you had it either. Like, I guess Miami, technically that. Every time they went up against a good team, though, they sucked. So I don't know how much I really believed in their offense, but they did put up numbers.
I think Detroit's been that high-flying offense.
But they were more of it last year than they have been this year. I think you have more well-rounded teams this year. At the top of the league, I think some of the teams are just more well-rounded. Detroit is that. Their defense is better this year than it was a year ago. And their offense, while maybe coming down a bit, still really good. Baltimore, probably a little more well-rounded this year than they were last year. I think Buffalo is a more well-rounded team than they were last year. I think the top of the league is just better. There are more legitimate contenders to me this season than there were last year. I think the thing that's changed a bit, and like last year this was also the case, but the Chiefs don't feel quite as inevitable despite the fact that they're 9-0. So maybe that plays a little bit into it. I don't know. I don't know, man. I think it is a combination of the teams that have been disappointing. Your point, T-Bone, is a fair one of the offenses, like the passing offenses especially, have not been quite as high-flying, and I think some of that is the receiver injuries that we've seen ravage the league so far this year. And then it's the number of teams that have won 2 or 3 games. But despite all of those things, I think it's been a really fun season to watch, honestly. As a viewer, I don't think watching on Sundays that it's a down year at all.
Yeah, I don't either. It's funny, both of you said the Chiefs, and you're right. They've been bad, and like Patrick Mahomes has not been the same guy, but they're still, in my opinion, one of the more exciting teams because I'm wondering how the hell they keep doing this. And you're watching them. Like, that's the thing. It might be down in terms of the numbers, but in terms of the intrigue, I don't think that's dropped at all. Even the Jets and Cowboys stink, and you're like, how is this possible? But yet you find yourself kind of still watching and wondering what the hell happened.
I think some of this also is like young quarterbacks that haven't quite taken that step that you were hoping for. Like Caleb Williams. People were really excited about him coming into the season, and he certainly has not lived up to expectation. Anthony Richardson has been a disaster so far this year. Some of the young guys that we thought, okay, yeah, maybe this is the year that it looks a little better. Tua has not looked as good this season as well. A lot of them have just, Will Levis as well, Bryce Young, they just have not lived up to expectations. And when you see that happen and they're supposed to be now kind of taking that next step, it does make the quarterback play look a little bit worse as well.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that kind of ties into what I was saying of whether you want to call it the high flying or like I just read off a couple of those teams that are like near the top of their divisions that are playoff caliber teams. Like there's not a team you really trust. Like maybe Detroit's that team that probably has got the most trustworthiness to them.
But isn't that an every year thing?
I think really, because I think like last year Kansas City felt inevitable, to your point.
Last year?
Yeah.
The Chiefs were terrible last year.
I think for whatever reason, by the time you got to the playoffs, you looked at it and said,
we're not there yet.
Holmes is going to be doing his thing. And their defense was good. Like, they still have a little of that to me, though they are flawed. I saw
Chiefs
them win last year.
Way better this year than they were at this point last year. Last year, they were 8-5 through the first 13 weeks and had lost to, like, some pretty mediocre teams.
But I think there was teams that people still looked at last year and really said, I feel like I can trust that team.
I feel like that's an every year thing.
I don't know if it's an every year thing. Like this year, I really don't think you can pinpoint anybody. Detroit is like maybe the one team I trust the most right now.
Who did you trust last year?
Let me pull up the standings.
See, because I feel like I trust the Buffalo Bills more this year than I did last year.
100%. I feel like I trust teams more this year. I trust Detroit more now than I did at this point last year.
I trust the Ravens more now than I do last year.
Absolutely.
Now, I still don't buy into Lamar Jackson in the postseason, but I trust them more because of their game. The Lions, I trust 100% more than what I did last year because their defense was so bad.
It's interesting that we have such different perspectives. T-Bone, I think you're more reflective of a lot of people that are watching the league this year. And so I'm not saying you're wrong. Clearly, like it's whatever you feel as you're watching.
Like that,
No, the text line's agreeing with you more than us.
Yeah.
Like last year going into the playoffs, and maybe like.
But we're not there. This is what's hard. Is like we're not at that point.
But we're talking about like what you're looking at the season right now. Like for
10 weeks in, that's not the playoffs.
But I think last year, by the time you got to it, you were looking at Buffalo's. You kind of trusted them, even though they had like that weird vibe to them. Miami, I don't think they ever had real trust. But like people believed in Baltimore last year, right? People believed in the Baltimore Ravens, I believe, with Lamar Jackson. He was putting up MVP style numbers last season. Texans, they were a team that people seem to believe in a lot. I think by the time...
I think you've got some revisionist history
Chiefs
here.
Maybe not here. The tone problem. Cowboys were not one of those teams that I agree with. The Lions were there. The 49ers were there. Like all these teams that I just listed through, I think there was some belief in those teams.
You trusted Lions more last year than this season?
No, I said the Lions I trust this year. I think they're the only team I trust this season.
I misheard.
Why do you trust the Chiefs Why did you trust the Chiefs more last year than this year? I'm trying to understand.
Maybe it was just because Patrick Mahomes was still playing good football.
He wasn't.
It was his receivers were his problem. Mahomes was playing good football
well either.
See, I thought Mahomes played fine last year. It was a problem with Butterfingers in his wide receiver room.
On a scale of 1 to 10, Mahomes was like a 4 last year. He's like a 7 this year.
Didn't
He's
they
playing
lose to
so
Russell
much
Wilson
better.
and the Broncos last year?
Yeah, he's playing so much better football this season than he did last year. Last year, he was awful, man, especially in the first 10 weeks of the year. I think we're having some revisionist history here on what last season felt like, especially with Baltimore. Early on Baltimore last year, I remember, Alex, we did the pick 'em, and it felt like every week it was whack-a-mole with them, where you would pick them one week and they would lose.
Bite you.
Not pick against them the next week and they would win. Here's what they did early last year. Beat Cincy by a score. Lost to Indianapolis in overtime. Lost to Pittsburgh by a score. Beat Tennessee by a score. Beat Arizona by a score. Lost against Cleveland. Baltimore was not a trustworthy team at this point last year. So I think this year there are more trustworthy teams than there were at this point last year, but maybe I'm off.
I'm looking at the AFC last year. I feel like there were the teams I trusted last year, the Dolphins, which bit me hard.
And they stunk.
And then the Texans. And the Texans were like, I'm buying them because they're doing it, but I don't know how sustainable it is. But the teams that I feel like I trust more this year are teams that I looked at last year as yeah, they're flawed from top to bottom.
I really like what we're seeing. This year, I trust the Chiefs. I trust Baltimore more than I did last year. And when I say trust, I mean, I think they're going to get to the playoffs and have a real chance to get to the AFC Championship game, right? Final four. Buffalo, I feel that way about as well. In the NFC, I feel like I can pretty much trust Detroit. I feel pretty good about what Green Bay is going to be. That's 6 teams that I just mentioned. Last year, I think there were maybe 3. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could argue 4. I trusted San Francisco and Detroit last year in the NFC, and on the AFC side of things, I'm not sure I trusted anybody.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't feel good about the Chiefs up until we finally got to the playoffs.
And it's weird you listed off those NFC teams because I would add in the Commanders. I trust the Commanders like I trusted the Texans last year, where it's this probably is going to look awful next season, but for right now, they're consistent and I know what they're doing.
Yeah, and maybe my opinion is skewed because I look at the AFC playoff picture and I think it's just disgusting.
AFC?
I hate watching the Chargers. I hate watching the Broncos. The Texans have all kinds of issues. I can't tell you. Love Kerry Davis. I can't tell you how much I hate watching his football team, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Did you enjoy watching the Browns, the Dolphins, or the Steelers last year? Because all of those teams made the playoffs
no,
last year.
but they ended up becoming a team that at the end of it, you looked at, they were good defensively, and Joe Flacco suddenly became this thing. It was oh, that's kind of a cool story. I kind of find myself rooting for the Cleveland Browns.
Did you enjoy watching the Bucks, the Eagles, or the Rams last year?
Well, I enjoyed the Rams. I actually thought the Bucks were, though they weren't a great team, they felt better. Baker Mayfield was playing really good football. They have fun wide receivers when you look at them.
So basically, you like offense, and we're not seeing offense this year. Is what I'm getting out of this conversation.
Well, it's not, yes, but just some of the teams that are to me, I view them as run-first teams. And that's what I was saying earlier is I feel like you're seeing the shift back to the running game. And again, I enjoy watching the NFL. I know I'm coming off of this I'm never turning on red zone again.
That's what I heard.
I enjoy watching the game, but I can see how the perspective is, the quality looks different, right? I don't think it is as good, quote unquote, as it was a year ago, even though I don't think it's that much different. I just don't see the high-flying offense that I look at and go, man, I love sitting down and watching this team play.
He's T-Bone, that's Alex, I'm BK. Coming up next, we're going to attempt to sing Believe It or Not here on 101 ESPN. I'm going to try.
Sing it, fellas.
All right, sit up,
maybe not
BK. We got it.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
free.
Flying away on a wing and a prayer.
Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
I liked it.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Believe It or Not. You guys give us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are believing it or not here on 101
Better when you
ESPN.
flapped your wings.
No, I didn't like the wings, and I like how he dropped it down a little bit. That's a professional singer right
That's
there.
the only way I could do
Yeah,
it.
he
There was
realizes falsetto's not there. Got to drop it down to a little baritone.
All right, guys, believe it or not,
I don't even know if that's
314-399-9646 is the Air
Sure.
Comfort Service text line. I feel like that was right.
Okay. Yeah,
You used the right description.
I used to be in band, but I don't remember.
My wife is like a degree in singing, so I should know that, but no.
Really?
Yeah, she's a professional singer, man.
Really?
Yeah.
I feel like she's a hairdresser, no?
Well,
She
that
sing while-
seemed a little demeaning.
If she'll sing while she cuts my hair,
She
I'd
does.
win.
She does.
Really?
Yeah, she puts on a show. She'll turn on
What?
some show tunes and dance for you.
What's the go-to?
No, but I might if you get more clients for it. She's a big show tunes lady, you know?
Show tunes.
Yeah, musicals. Big into them.
Oh, I'm not a big musical guy.
All right, guys, believe it
Missing
or
out.
not, Oklahoma is going to be in the SEC what Nebraska has become. What I mean by that is Nebraska was this, like, great college football program, can't miss, right? And then suddenly, like, we shifted away from the way things used to be to the way things are. And for the last decade or so, Nebraska's been an afterthought. They're no longer thought of as an Alabama, Ohio State, except they're not a blue blood at this point in time.
Oh, I'll believe that one.
Oklahoma was once upon a time thought of that way, right? And really up until recently had always been that. Believe it or not, Oklahoma is the next Nebraska.
I'm going to believe that one. I think it's going to be really hard for them to recruit now in the SEC for how many more teams are in there. And by more teams being in there, more intriguing teams in terms of the recruitment portal. I don't know how easy it's going to be for Oklahoma as much as it's been in the past.
Yeah, I'll believe it because when I think Oklahoma, I don't know if they've got the NIL war chest to compete with the SEC. Like, you think of Ole Miss. I mean, hell, you think of Mizzou. They're doing pretty well with the NIL.
Yeah. And
then you add in Alabama, Georgia, Texas. Like, good luck. I'll believe it. I don't know how you're going to be able to compete with them in this era of college football. I think in the previous era, prior to NIL, when the money was going under the table, I think they probably stand a better chance than they do now.
I'm going to believe this because I think they are in a really tough spot with recruiting as well. Now you've got Texas A&M and Texas in the SEC.
I forgot about A&M.
Both recruiting from that fertile Texas recruiting grounds. I just don't know how Oklahoma competes with these teams, man. Now, instead of being a big fish in a smaller pond of the Big 12, you're just one of many. I think Oklahoma is about to go through a really tough stretch where their good seasons are going to be like 9 or 10 wins. They're going to be in a similar spot to Mizzou. And I don't know how Oklahoma responds to that. Because Nebraska, when they first went through it, they fired Bo Pelini, and now they've been dealing with like 7-win seasons ever since. It's not easy to regain that ground once you fall down to that second or third tier in college football. I think they're about to become the next Nebraska in that regard. Alex, what do you got for us?
All right, guys, I'm going to go back to our junk drawer topic. Believe it or not, Mike Tyson knocks out Paul tomorrow night.
I think Paul beats
I'm
him.
believing this so much. I am anticipating just a right hook from him on the jaw and just watch the bodies hit the floor.
Yeah, I think it's all set up. I think all of this is set up for Jake Paul to get rich. And hey, more power to him.
Oh, he will
It's
get
clearly
rich.
working.
Both of them are getting rich, but I'm expecting a knockout punch.
Yeah,
just like I used to do when I was 9 on the video games.
I would never bet on a 60-year-old to knock out a
Oh,
guy
I'm
that's
not
in his
betting
30s.
on anything. I'm just going to have some
no,
buffalo wings, some beer, and I'm going to enjoy my night.
I've got a quick one. T-Bone, I don't think you're going to care about this, but believe it or not, Alex, we should be going to Rockville in Daytona next May. Listen to some of these headliners. Linkin Park, Korn, Green Day, Three Doors Down, Hailstorm, Incubus, Good Charlotte, Sublime, Rob Zombie. What else do we got down here?
Good Charlotte's getting back together?
Yeah,
I didn't think they were
apparently.
singing together anymore.
Marilyn Manson, Chevelle, Newfound Glory, Bowling for Soup, Red Jump Apparatus, Taking Back Sunday, POD, Daughtry.
Tell me Daughtry?
Yeah.
Is Simple Plan going to be there?
I have not seen them
my
yet.
God.
Saving Abel.
Yeah, and believe it. Whatever
This is insane.
segment we're doing. You had me at Linkin Park. I don't know if you guys have heard their new album with the lady that's taken over for Chester, I believe, is the one that passed away. I freaking love it. And God, that's my childhood right there. Good Charlotte,
Dude,
Avenged
all of
Sevenfold, Taking Back Sunday. Oh my God.
This sounds amazing.
Don't know if I
Theory
ever
of a
seen
Dead
it.
Man, Blue October.
Theory of a Dead Man too? Daughtry?
Hoobastank.
Oh my God.
I think I'm out.
Somebody just texted and said, are there any good bands there? Yeah. Every single one of them.
No, who sent that? That's the right
Alice in
text.
Chains. I don't know if these are all great bands, but they are very much nostalgia. Like if you were
that's up
somebody that
Ferrario's
grew up
alley.
in
Oh my God.
the 2000s.
I'm texting my wife and telling her we're taking a trip. Gotta get the 3-year-old into some of this music, you know?
For sure. All right, T-Bone, what do you got?
Guys, believe it or not.
I already win, man. Thanks for remembering.
Go ahead, T-Bone.
What?
He didn't know I went.
Believe it or not, Russell Wilson is the long-term answer for the Steelers beyond this year at quarterback.
Not.
I have no reasons why. I just not. He could do this all he wants. Mike Tomlin might just know how to get the best out of a quarterback for a year, and that's all I'm going to believe in.
I think they're going to sign him to a contract extension after the year.
Wow.
I mean, where else are you turning if you're Pittsburgh? You're too good to get a high draft pick. Justin Fields wasn't the guy. You benched him for the Russell Cook movement. I think he's probably their quote-unquote long-term answer for the next couple of years in Pittsburgh.
I would rather have Daniel Jones on a cheap deal.
Okay, now you lost me there.
Then Russell Wilson?
Yeah, I would take Russell Wilson over Daniel Jones. At least I've seen it with Russell Wilson.
Russ just fits perfectly for the Steelers. Daniel Jones, every time I just hear that name, I just see the meme of his eyes wide open like, oh my God, the defense.
And the one good year of Daniel Jones was because Saquon Barkley was like should have been the MVP that season.
I don't think Daniel Jones is good. I also don't think Russell Wilson can sustain what we're watching right now. I think some of these 50-50 balls are going to go on the other side of the 50. And we're going to start seeing some rough weeks from Russell Wilson sooner rather than later. They have a great defense, and that makes up for it. But I think we're seeing the high end of Russ right now. There's going to be a low end of that. And when that happens, we're going to be singing a different, not just us, but people will be singing a different tune. I would rather have Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, one of these other mid-level quarterbacks on a cheap deal. I want to make that very clear than what Russell Wilson is likely to command after what is a solid bounce-back season this year.
The nice thing if it is Russ, though, is it's probably only like another 2-3 years.
That's fair.
Like Jones, not like he's going to get a big contract, but one good year from Daniel Jones, a bounce-back year. Now he's going to be looking for the long-term contract again.
All right, believe it or not, guys, from the 314, Dalibor Dvorsky will be called up within the next 2 weeks. No, I'm not believing this.
They're not bringing him up until post-trade deadline. Everybody's seeing the offense right now, and that's great. They know the offense is there. Their issue with Dalibor Dvorsky is making sure he understands where else to be on the ice in the right moments and the right time. And you're not bringing him up to play in a second-line role for a team that just doesn't have any depth down the middle. You keep him in the minors and you let him work through his stuff so that post-trade deadline he comes up and gets to play.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe it. I don't think he's going to be up here until post-deadline. That's the most logical point for him when you would potentially see him.
Believe it or not, guys, by the end of the season, Kyler Murray will be considered an MVP candidate.
Not. I think he'll be so far down the list in terms of all of the others that you won't even be talking about him.
He's having a good season, though.
He is.
I think that I'm not going to believe it, but I saw someone, I can't remember who it was, write that the Cardinals might be the next version of the Lions, to where this is like that year where the Lions started 1-7, then they reeled off whatever it was, 6 or 7 wins in a row. I could kind of see that because I think Jonathan Gannon appears to be a good head coach. Kyler is now playing really good football, and you're not hearing as much distraction of him in his Call of Duty games. And they seem to be building the roster pretty well. I could see where they end up becoming the next Detroit Lions.
I can see it. They have an identity, too, kind of like the Lions, of being a run-first offense. They use Kyler Murray's legs as a weapon. He has 370 yards on the ground so far this year, getting back to what he was earlier on in his career. James Conner's awesome. That guy's just been a good running back in the NFL for almost a decade now.
Yeah.
Every year, people in fantasy are like, don't want James Conner. He's getting old. And every year he gets hurt for 2 games. And you're like, that's why I didn't take him. And every year he finishes with 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. they've got an identity. They know who they are as an offense. They just really need to improve that defense. They need more dudes, especially coming off of the edge. But Kyler's having a good season. No, I do not think that he will be a top 5 MVP candidate, though, by the end of the year. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK.
I was just going to throw one more, but if we don't have time, no worries.
Is it Blues related?
It is.
What do you got?
Believe it or not, Colton Parayko is going to be on Team Canada for the Four Nations game.
Yeah, believe it.
Oh, I thought that was going to be like, wow, that's a really good one.
Is an
Alex.
Army involved?
Yeah.
Oh,
That doesn't mean everything.
Yeah, Bennington Hofer, they're going.
Bennington Hofer. Did you mean Bennington?
I said Bennington.
Oh, did you mean Parayko or did you really mean both goaltenders?
Yeah, I meant both goalies. Why not? Army's like, hey, you see
honestly,
our roster?
If
We're
you could
doing pretty good.
Bennington Hofer or Bennington and Aiden Hill, it'd probably go Bennington Hofer.
Do you think that Parayko will make it?
I do.
Yeah, I agree. Bennington and Parayko are both good players. Sure.
Yeah, and like everybody's speculating, all these guys, they're taking a ton of offensive defensemen. Like, you're going to have to somebody who can play defense for that team, right?
I mean, if we can win 6-5.
Coming up next, the Blues set expectations pretty high this year. They were hoping to make the playoffs. Did they set them too high? And what did that do for our expectations watching this team? We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here. The Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Blues back in action tonight as they visit the Buffalo Sabres. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 5:30 with Alex Ferrario and Joey Vitale. Then Joey will join Chris Carver for Puck Drop at 6:30. This Sports update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Alongside Alex and T-Bone on BK. So did the Blues set expectations too high this season? Alex, before the year, Doug Armstrong said, you know what, I think we can at least compete for one of those spots in the wild card. Right below the top three in the division. Kind of similar to last year in that regard. And that made people kind of evaluate things accordingly. Now, early on in the season, I think that was pretty much where I had them as well. But then they had these injuries and things have been set back, and it doesn't necessarily feel like they're going to be falling into that spot anymore. Alex, when you think about where expectations were, where expectations now are, and what they should be, how do you view that relative to what Doug Armstrong set them at?
I don't think he set the expectations too high. I viewed this team with their offseason moves as a playoff team. We went through the math of what they were adding on the offensive side versus what they had the previous year and where playoff teams were. And the math showcased that, yeah, if they get the contributions you expect from the players that we went through, you were a playoff team in all sense purposes of what you had on your forward side. Defensively, you were expecting an improvement. You got it. Goaltending, pretty much hoping the same. Now, they haven't been there, but overall, I think the expectations were set properly in terms of competing for a playoff spot because of the additions that they brought in. You fixed your bottom six. Your top six was supposed to be improved with a Dylan Holloway. Your defense was much more improved. It looked like they were going to be there. The expectations have shifted because of these injuries that I don't view them as a playoff team anymore. Now, can they be there? Right now, it's keeping your head above water until you get players back. Maybe you're optimistically hoping that Thomas is back by the end of this month, Broberg's back by the Winter Classic. As long as you stay within striking distance, you got to go on a run, but you can do it. But I also view this team as you might be in so far of a hole by the time that those guys come back, and then also acclimating them back into the chemistry that you're trying to build. That might take a month. The next thing you know, you're going to have to put this miraculous comeback together for 2.5 months. So is it doable? Sure, as long as you don't go into like a 10-game losing skid like we saw 2 years ago. But my expectations aren't there anymore. My expectations now are looking at a team that's saying, is this the season that gets you what you might actually need to exit out of a retool in a top 5 pick?
Yeah, I feel like expectations were probably set a little too high by Doug Armstrong, because anytime, whether he meant to have it become this, anytime you mention, hey, we think we can compete for a playoff spot, not that we believe we're a playoff team, but we think we can compete for a playoff team. You know what words get crossed out in fans' minds? We think we can compete. It's, they think they're a playoff team. And I think that's kind of what's happened, is I think there's been some portion of the fan base, maybe this is where I fall a little bit victim of it and why I'm a little bit more critical of the way things have been going this year, is that I just think that was too much of an expectation to think they could compete for a playoff spot. I never saw them as a playoff caliber team going into the season. I think the realistic expectation should have been, hey, we probably know we're not a playoff team, but we're looking to see if we can get the growth from a Dylan Holloway, a Philip Broberg, some of these other pieces that we brought in. Jordan Kyrou take his game to the next level. Buchnevich, Neighbors repeat his season. Thomas continued to repeat his performance, maybe even improve to a 100-point guy that we talked about in the preseason. I think anytime he brought up playoffs as, we think we can compete for that, set the expectation a little too high for this St. Louis Blues team. Now, I do think those expectations have really shifted of, okay, now we're definitely know we're not that. It is completely and 100% in on, okay, let's just focus on the development of the players that are on this roster and see if some of these guys can take their game to the next level. Yeah, from the 3-1-4, guys, we're not even a quarter of the way through the season. This wasn't a team that was going to be consistent. Way too early to make a decision either way. I think there's some truth to that, but I do think we can see, it's not a great team, and they're now dealing with some serious injuries to their top center, top defenseman. That's not a great place to be. I think what becomes really difficult as a fan when you're going through a spot like this is how to evaluate what you're watching night to night. Because if the president of hockey operations is telling me, I want this team to make the playoffs, that is our stated goal. Our stated goal is not just to retool. Our stated goal right now, because of what we were able to add in the offseason, is to make the postseason.
well, then I should judge them accordingly. And if I'm judging them compared to playoff teams, they haven't met those expectations this year, man. They're 7-9. I understand what the record is, but watching the performances night to night, they do not look like a playoff team to me. But if I evaluate them as a team that is just trying to get better for next season, that is trying to get the experience that is necessary for young players, well, then I think that you start to see, okay, they're, to your point, T-Bone, on some of the young players, you're starting to see some of those guys that have come through and have added themselves to the core. Holloway, Broberg being chief among them. It also is frustrating to me when you don't see the playing time that is there that's necessary for a guy like Zach Bolduc. So I think they're kind of trying to have their cake and eat it too. They want to make the playoffs, but they also want to develop these guys. It feels like they're caught in between.
Kind of like the Cardinals.
Yeah, and I think that we talk about them differently than the Cardinals because prior to the season, they said a lot of the right things. But now that we're in the season, I feel like we are talking about the Blues the way we talked about the Cardinals. And that's frustrating to me. And that's where it gets to, this is a messaging thing, and yet as an organization, it's really hard to set expectations properly. I'm going to be fascinated to see how the Cardinals handle this next year. Because right now they're saying all the right things, but then even recently, I remember in that piece with Katie Wu, Mo's comments were like, "Yeah, we might be a pretty similar team to last year now that we've got our money situation." They're going to end up falling into the exact same pitfalls of being like, "Yeah, could make the playoffs this year," and instead of being like, "No, this season is all about getting the reps that are necessary for young guys," it's going to be, might try to push, see where we go, maybe compete for a playoff spot. It's tough spot to be as an organization. I think this is the hardest place to be, is when you're in the middle trying to get back to the top, but you don't have the patience to get there because it takes some time. All right, coming up next, let's get into the BK and Ferrario Rewind here on 101 ESPN. If you missed anything from today's show, be sure to check out the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Alex, Blues back in action tonight against the Buffalo Sabres.
Sabres.
We learned today why they're called that.
And why did we, BK?
Yeah, so they're right near the Canada border.
True.
So the reason why it's S-A-B-R-E-S and not S-A-B-E-R-S is because of the way that Canada spells Sabres.
Dunder Mifflin and Sablé.
Who would have known? So that is a little history lesson for everybody out there.
The more you know, T-Bone.
Buffalo versus the Blues coming up later on this afternoon. Alex has pregame coverage starting at 5:30 on your home of the Blues 101 ESPN. Alex, what's the number one thing you're watching for in this game?
It's going to be consistency in this one. If you remember going into that Boston one, the thing I wanted to see was how they looked in the first period, a response, and they looked good in the first period against Boston. The problem was you weren't consistent enough. I'm really curious how this team is handling the confidence factor, because we've heard them talk a little bit about, lack of confidence. You just kind of played protective hockey against Boston. You can't do that anymore. There's no more, we're losing confidence as a team. No, you got to get it back, and you got to get it back fast if you want to be in this one. So what's it look like consistently? Because against Buffalo, I know they don't have Tage Thompson, still a really fast team, and we've seen fast teams hurt the Blues. So what do you look like from start to finish?
I want to see what Brandon Saad looks like. He's been bumped back up to that second line. You said earlier today, if there's two guys that you can look at that say, hey, I need more out of them, it's Brandon Saad and Braden Shin. Well, now they're paired together once again. That's that pairing that we've seen for a couple of years now. Saad and Shin are both on pace this year for 10 goals. That's not where they're going to finish. I'd be shocked. They're going to be in that 15 to 20 goal range at a minimum. I want to see what he looks like bouncing back from being demoted down to the fourth line where he played 2 minutes in the third period. Bannister had some interesting comments about him earlier today, so I just want to see what Brandon Saad looks like in this one. On the football side of things, we got Thursday night football. Commanders versus the Eagles. 4-point line in favor of Philly for this one. T-Bone, who you got, Philly or Washington?
I like Philly in this one. I think the offense, though they haven't put enough points, it still looks just a little bit off for Washington. It kind of looks like it's stagnating a little bit. I don't know if that was because of the injury to Daniels. I don't know if that's because the league is starting to figure out that offense now under Kingsbury, which has, by the way, been a common theme under the Cliff Kingsbury era, especially when he's with Arizona. I think Philadelphia's going to win. I think it's close, though. If you're taking the spread, I like the Commanders +4.
Yeah, I think Washington wins this one. Now, they have not been good against the run, and Saquon might go off in this game, but I still think Washington is the better team because I look at them as they got the better quarterback.
I don't have a feel on the side, honestly. I would probably pick Philly in the game, but if I was trying to make a bet, I would take the under. Under 49.5 would be my bet for the game tonight. Earlier today, we also talked about Brady Cook. It's looking like he's doubtful for the game on Saturday. What does that mean for Mizzou? What does that mean for how this season is going to be remembered among Mizzou fans? Check out the full conversation. 101ESPN.com. Free 101 ESPN app is where you can go to find that. You can always watch us as well on YouTube during, before, or after the show. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL. The studio cams are powered by the Air Alliance team. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We will be back with you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Until then, the Fast Lane is coming up next here on 101 ESPN.